Hello everyone, and welcome back to Mr. Night Fear. I know many of you listen to these stories to help you fall asleep. So before you get settled in, I'd love for you to leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from. And if you're enjoying the episodes, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Now, let's get comfortable, relax, and begin. After my breakup, I had no choice but to move back in with my parents. I had been living with my ex in Boston. And let me give you some advice. Never sign a lease with someone you've only been dating for a short time. He turned out to be someone completely different than I thought. My parents live in rural western Massachusetts, the kind of place where the roads are dark, the trees are thick, and the houses sit far apart. I'm in my 20s, and I've always preferred the city. But for now, I'm stuck here, hoping it's only temporary until I can find my own apartment. I got my old job back at an urgent care clinic I worked at before moving. They welcomed me back, but it's not exactly where I want to be. The worst part? The night shifts. They're boring, they wreck my sleep schedule, and my social life is non-existent. One particular night, I got off work at 4:00 a.m. I was starving, so I stopped at a local bagel shop that opens early and grabbed a sandwich and a salad. I also needed gas, so I pulled into a deserted Shell station, one of the few open at this hour. The parking lot was huge, but as usual, nearly empty. I went inside to pay cash, and when I came back out, I noticed a blue sedan had pulled up at one of the other pumps. As I started fueling, I saw the driver get out. A man, maybe in his mid-40s, skinny, pale, and smiling. He locked his gas pump in place so it would keep pumping, then casually walked over to my side. "Wanna see a funny trick?" he asked. I immediately regretted making eye contact. Still, for some reason, I muttered, "What trick?" He held up his hand and started doing that stupid old trick where you pretend to pull your finger off. He kept glancing up at me, grinning like he was waiting for some reaction. His eyes were cold, emotionless, his movements deliberate. I fake laughed, hoping he'd leave. He didn't. Even when I looked away, he kept repeating the trick like he was enjoying my discomfort. When my gas tank was finally full, I felt a surge of relief. I hurried inside to grab my change, and when I came back out, he was gone. His car was still there. The gas nozzle was still pumping, but he was nowhere to be seen. Uneasy, I got in my car, locked the doors, and just to be safe, I checked the back seat. Empty. I pulled out of the station and made it home in 5 minutes. After parking in my parents' driveway, I grabbed the hidden spare key from its usual spot, unlocked the front door, and quickly stashed it back. I locked the door behind me, always. I tiptoed into the kitchen, being careful not to wake my parents. I was just about to take a bite of my sandwich when I heard the front door unlock. It opened, closed. I froze. My stomach twisted. Mouth full of food, I muttered, "Mom? Dad?" No answer. No footsteps. Heart pounding. I peeked into the foyer. No one was there. I bolted up the stairs to my parents' room, waking them in a panic. My dad jumped out of bed immediately and rushed downstairs. My mom and I followed. The spare key was gone. My dad grabbed a flashlight and checked every room, every closet. I stayed back, scanning for anything he might have missed. I checked under the dining table. Nothing. I checked the closet. Empty. Then I crouched down to check under the couch and felt a chill crawl up my spine. Because under the table, in the darkness, was a pair of eyes. He was there, the man from the gas station. I screamed. My mom screamed. My dad rushed in, fists ready. The man scrambled out from under the table, grinning like a lunatic. He tried to fight my dad off, but we all jumped on him, kicking, hitting, doing whatever we could. He finally shoved us off and bolted through the front door. We called the police immediately. That night, an officer parked outside to deter him from coming back. But the thought that he still had the key, that terrified me the most. I work as a bartender at a bar and restaurant just outside Baltimore. It's a busy place with a unique setup. No waiters, just bartenders like me, and the cooks in the back. If you want food or non-alcoholic drinks, you order at the bar and pick it up yourself. I guess management was trying to cut costs by not hiring servers, but honestly, I don't mind. It keeps things fast-paced, and I'd rather stay busy than stand around waiting for something to do. For whatever reason, this place is weirdly popular. I mean, it's decent, but nothing special. Still, we get packed every weekend, the energy buzzing with loud music, a lively crowd, and a small dance floor near the DJ booth. Time flies when you're slammed with customers. That night started off like any other. A Friday, peak hours, the usual chaos. The crowd skewed younger, mostly college kids looking to drink their weight in tequila shots. That meant one thing for me: more spills, more screaming, and worse tips. At one point, a group of frat guys ordered rounds of shots faster than I could slice the limes. One of them was so hammered, he hit me with the same pickup line 3 times. I was rolling my eyes and shaking up a cocktail when I saw them. An elderly couple walked in and took a booth in the back corner. At first, nothing about them seemed unusual, just a little out of place. This bar was rowdy as hell, and they stuck out like a sore thumb. But I was too busy to think much about it. Fast forward maybe 30 minutes to an hour. The crowd was still going strong, but I kept glancing at the couple. Something about them felt wrong. They hadn't ordered anything. No drinks, no food, nothing. Even stranger, they weren't talking. They just sat there, completely motionless, staring at the wall beside them. My hands kept working, pouring, shaking, serving, but my mind was stuck on them. At first, I figured maybe they were waiting for someone. Or maybe they didn't understand the self-service setup. When I finally had a break, I decided to check on them. I walked over with my best customer service smile. "Hey folks, can I get you anything?" Neither of them turned to look at me. The woman didn't move a muscle, just kept staring at the wall like I wasn't even there. But the man, slowly, he turned his head toward me. It was too slow, unnatural, like a bad animatronic. When his face came into view, I felt a wave of unease wash over me. His skin was pale, almost gray, and sunken like it had been stretched too tightly over his skull. His eyes were deep-set, dark, and completely expressionless. He didn't speak, just gave a single firm shake of his head. I swallowed hard, muttered, "All right then," and noped the hell out of there. Something about the way he looked at me made my stomach twist. I went back to the bar, shaking it off. Maybe they were just weirdos. Maybe they were waiting for a ride. I had drinks to make. I didn't have time to dwell on it. An hour passed. I hadn't checked on them since, but then, instinctively, I glanced at their booth and nearly dropped the glass in my hand. They were staring directly at me, both of them. Their eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that sent a cold shiver down my spine. I quickly looked away, pretending to be busy. My heart was hammering in my chest. What the hell was wrong with them? I told myself not to look again, but I couldn't help it. I stole another glance. The booth was empty. They were gone, and I hadn't seen them leave. Relief flooded through me. Good. Let them go be creepy somewhere else. By closing time, I was still thinking about them. I started wiping down the bar, my coworker Karen locking up beside me. She's been working here for years, notices everything, remembers everyone. "Hey," I said, forcing a laugh. "Did you see that old couple in the back tonight? The weird ones?" Karen frowned. "What old couple?" I stared at her. The ones sitting in the corner booth. The man looked sickly. The woman didn't say a word. She shook her head. "I have no idea what you're talking about." I blinked. "Karen, they were right there. They sat for hours and never ordered anything." She crossed her arms. I'd remember something like that. Then she rattled off 10 random customers from the night, including what they drank and wore. I forced a chuckle, brushing it off. Guess I'm losing it. Karen grinned. "Maybe you need a drink." I laughed with her, but inside, I was spiraling. I tried to shake it off as I left the bar. The parking lot was mostly empty, just a few cars scattered around. I was fumbling for my keys when something caught my eye. Across the street, 2 figures, standing under the lone streetlight. I froze. It was them, the old man and the woman, just standing there facing me, watching. I wanted to scream, but my voice wouldn't come. I didn't wait. I ran to my car, locked the doors, and peeled the hell out of there. The entire drive home, my hands shook on the wheel. I kept checking my mirrors, half expecting to see them following me. By the time I reached my house, I was on the verge of a breakdown. I never saw them again. I never got an explanation. I don't think I ever will. But I know one thing for sure. They weren't human. What I'm about to tell you still makes me question what's real and what's not. This happened to my dad and me 2 years ago, and even now, just thinking about it gives me chills. I know how it sounds. If I were you, I wouldn't believe it either. But I swear to you, every word is true. My dad and I had planned a camping trip deep in the backcountry. It was something we did often, a way to get away from real life, disconnect from the stress of the world, and just enjoy nature. The place we picked was perfect. Hiking trails, fishing spots, zip lines. A little touristy, sure, but it had deep history. Native American land. The first night was exactly what we wanted. Families at nearby campsites. The warm glow of campfires. Kids laughing in the distance. We cooked hot dogs, roasted marshmallows, cracked open a few beers, and made small talk with other campers. It was one of those nights where everything felt simple, peaceful, right. Then came the second night. That's when everything changed. That morning, a park ranger stopped by and told us that we were the only ones left in the park. Nobody else had booked a site. At first, we were psyched, the entire campground to ourselves. No noisy neighbors, no distractions, just the wilderness. We spent the day hiking along the river, fishing, taking it slow. At one point, we even sat by the water and listened to a scary podcast, joking about how we were leaning into the spooky atmosphere. By sunset, we were feeling good, a little buzzed from the beers, pleasantly exhausted from the day. That's when we decided to walk to the park's information center to charge our phones and grab some snacks. The walk back to camp was when the unease set in. The moment we stepped back onto the trail, I noticed it. The woods felt different. The air was thicker, like the atmosphere had shifted. The sky had this weird tint, almost as if the light was being stretched out in a way that didn't feel natural. My dad slowed his pace and looked at me. "Doesn't this feel off?" he asked. "Like we're in some kind of dream." He was right. Something about the trees. They felt endless, stretching into the dark in every direction. My chest felt tight, and suddenly, I had this overwhelming feeling that we were being watched. We didn't talk much after that. We just kept walking, both of us glancing over our shoulders, like we expected to see something lurking in the shadows. Back at camp, we stayed close to the fire. Neither of us mentioned how weird the walk had felt. We didn't need to. It was like we had both silently agreed to pretend nothing was wrong. We roasted marshmallows, played music, even smoked a little weed to take the edge off. Then, at 9 p.m., it happened. Bang. A deep, heavy crack echoed through the trees, like a tree falling or something massive hitting the ground. It came from the river, maybe 100 yards away. We both froze, exchanging glances. My dad grabbed his flashlight and shined it toward the sound. Nothing. No movement. No glowing eyes. Nothing. Bigfoot, we joked, letting out nervous laughter, but neither of us really believed it. Then, a few minutes later, bang. Louder this time. Farther away, but the exact same sound. We scanned the darkness with our flashlights again, but the beams barely cut through the thick trees. The light felt swallowed. Then came the third bang. Closer. Something was moving toward us. Circling the campsite. My high was gone. My dad turned to me, and in the glow of the fire, I could see it, fear in his eyes. "Get in the tent," he said. We grabbed the last of the firewood and threw it onto the fire, hoping the flames would scare off whatever was out there. Then we scrambled into the tent, leaving everything else behind. Inside, I dropped flat onto the ground, lying still listening. My dad moved a little slower, still outside, shining the flashlight around. Then, bang, the loudest one yet. The ground shook beneath us. I looked up just in time to see my dad freeze, still standing outside the tent. He was staring into the trees, eyes wide, face pale. "Dad?" I whispered. "Nothing." "Dad." No response. It was like he was paralyzed. I scrambled forward, grabbing his arm. "Dad, what is it?" He blinked, his breathing sharp. Then, in a low, shaky voice, he muttered, "It's standing there." I felt cold all over. "What's standing there?" He swallowed hard. "I don't know." I couldn't stop myself. I turned my head, following his gaze. And that's when I saw it. Between the trees, just beyond the firelight, something tall stood completely still. Not an animal, not a person, just a shape, unmoving, watching. I wanted to shine my flashlight at it, but some deep, primal instinct in my brain screamed, "Don't. If you see it clearly, it'll know." The fire crackled. The trees creaked. My pulse pounded in my ears. Then, it moved, not toward us, but to the side. Circling. Slow. Deliberate. We dived into the tent, zipped it up, and held our breath. Outside, the fire flickered. Shadows stretched. And then, silence. We lay there, frozen, waiting, listening. And after what felt like forever, the woods went dead quiet. No bangs. No footsteps. Just the soft crackle of the dying fire. And the feeling, deep in my gut, that something was still out there, watching. Neither of us slept that night. At the first hint of sunrise, we packed up faster than we ever have before. We didn't eat. We didn't talk. We just left. To this day, my dad and I don't talk about it. We both saw something. We both felt it. But whatever it was, it didn't follow us. I haven't been back to that place since. And I never will. My dad's voice was trembling. It's like a wall of darkness. He sat by the zipper of the tent, gripping the only weapon we had, a small knife. Useless, really, but it was all we had. I buried myself under my sleeping bag, trying to move as quietly as possible. Then the vibration started. I don't know how to explain it. It wasn't just a sound. It was a feeling. A deep, low hum that didn't just fill the air but seemed to press into our bodies, making our chests tight. My dad whispered, "You hear that?" I couldn't answer. I just nodded. I was too scared to make a sound. The feeling was overwhelming, like we were being hunted. For 5 minutes, we sat there in silence, listening to that horrible vibration. And then, another sound. Not an animal. Not human. Something else. It was guttural, alien-like. A noise I can only describe as sounding like the Demogorgon from Stranger Things. A horrible, wet, clicking growl. A sound that didn't belong in this world. I stayed frozen, holding my breath, my fingers digging into my sleeping bag. I had a small mesh window next to me. If I turned my head, I could see outside, but I didn't. I couldn't. Some deep, primal fear told me that if I looked, it would know. My dad still sat by the zipper, gripping the knife, his knuckles white. The sound moved, shifting through the trees, circling us, watching, waiting. And then, I don't remember falling asleep. Neither does my dad. We were just awake one moment and the next. Nothing. We blacked out. No memories of dozing off. No time passing. Just gone. The next thing I remember, I shot up in panic, my heart racing. The tent was silent. The woods outside were still. My dad woke up at the same time, his hand still gripping the knife. Something was wrong. My first instinct was to grab my phone to check the time. Dead. I looked at my dad. "Check your phone." He pulled it out. Dead too. Both had been fully charged the night before. We had made sure. We wanted them in case of an emergency. Yet now, both were completely drained. We stepped outside the tent to pee, still feeling that lingering unease. We stood back to back, too scared to turn away from the trees. It was still pitch black outside. The air was cold. Still, something was off. Then we noticed. The food we left on the table, untouched. The fire we had stoked before diving into the tent, burned down to ash. Like it had been untouched for hours. The entire place felt wrong. Like we weren't supposed to be there anymore. Like something had decided to let us go. We didn't talk much after that. We waited out the night in silence, trying to get some real sleep. At sunrise, we packed up fast and left without looking back. The car ride home was the first time we actually spoke about what happened, and we both felt the same thing that night. Watched. Hunted. Like something was waiting for us to slip up. When we told my mom, she thought we were crazy. Maybe you were drugged, she said. Maybe you inhaled some weird gas. But it wasn't that. It was real. We both experienced the exact same thing. And whatever my dad saw out there, it wasn't human, and it wasn't natural. To this day, we've never heard another story like ours. We've never gone back to that campground, or camping at all, and I don't think we ever will. Sorry to interrupt. If you're enjoying the story, let me know in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. I remember the first and only time I saw a ghost. I was in 4th grade, and the memory is still vivid, haunting even. It happened in the kindergarten room of our school, a place that always seemed so innocent and bright. But that night was different. A chubby girl, dressed entirely in black, floated right in front of me. She waved a black handkerchief as if to mock my fear. I froze, unable to move, barely able to breathe. That was the first and last time I saw something beyond what my eyes could understand. Even though I've never seen another apparition, the eerie sensations never truly left me. Strange voices, the caress of cold, inexplicable gusts of wind. They followed me through the years, giving me chills and leaving goosebumps on my skin. I've tried to ignore them, pushing the experiences to the back of my mind, but ignoring them doesn't make them disappear. Now, as a third-year BS nursing student, I often find myself in places where the veil between the living and the unseen feels thin. We're currently doing our practicum in the delivery room of a hospital, one I won't name for privacy reasons. Before starting there, I'd never heard any ghostly stories about the place, but the delivery room operates on a different rhythm, especially during the midnight shifts. Ours ran from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. on my first night. I learned just how strange those hours could be. That shift, there were only 2 patients in the labor room. Around 1 a.m., one of them gave birth. After the delivery, the mother was transferred to her room in the ward. That left me, my fellow nursing students, and the staff to monitor the remaining patient. The exhaustion from the long hours weighed on everyone, and before long, most of the staff and students had dozed off. I stayed awake, busying myself with cleaning the delivery instruments. The room felt off. There was no other way to describe it. A strange unease settled over me as I worked, a discomfort I couldn't quite shake. While I cleaned, I felt the distinct sensation of someone walking behind me. Startled, I turned around, expecting to see one of my classmates, but there was no one there, only a cold gust of wind brushing past me. I shivered and whispered to myself, "That's weird," before turning back to my task, determined to ignore it. By 2:30 a.m., sleep was beginning to tug at my eyelids. I walked into the labor room to check on the remaining patient's vital signs. Once done, I sat down on a chair in the corner near the bed and leaned my head back against the wall, intending to rest my eyes for just a moment. That's when it happened. Something stirred me awake, though I couldn't say what. Slowly, I opened my eyes and saw a figure pacing across the labor room. At first, I thought it might be the staff nurse checking on the patient, but the figure was much smaller than an adult, As my vision cleared, I realized it was a little boy. He wasn't facing me, but I could see him clearly, dressed in a white shirt, jumping playfully in the corner of the room. My heart raced. How could a child have wandered into the labor room in the middle of the night? I tried to stand, to call out to him, but I couldn't move. My arms, my legs, even my fingers, all frozen. My voice refused to cooperate. I told myself, this isn't normal. That boy, he isn't like me. He's something else. My pulse thundered in my ears, and a cold chill ran through me as another gust of wind swept across the room. Desperate, I whispered to myself, calm down, Jessa. Pray, pray. I clung to the words, repeating them in my mind until everything faded into blackness. When I came to, I could hear voices around me. Slowly, I opened my eyes and saw some of my classmates awake, monitoring the patient. I glanced at my watch. It was 5 a.m. What had happened during those lost hours? The experience lingered in my mind, terrifying and unexplainable. I didn't share it with anyone that morning, keeping the strange encounter to myself. Weeks later, we returned to the delivery room for another shift, this time in the afternoon. With no patients to monitor, our clinical instructor began discussing concepts related to our practice. Eventually, the conversation shifted to ghost stories. I kept quiet, unwilling to share my own experience, but one of my classmates spoke up. She mentioned a story she'd heard from other students about the spirit of a little boy who played in the labor room. I froze. Every detail she described matched what I'd seen that night. To my surprise, even our clinical instructor chimed in, sharing her own eerie encounters in the same room. It was then I realized I wasn't alone. What I experienced wasn't a dream or a trick of the mind. It was real. When I was around 9 or 10, my dad landed a high-paying job that uprooted our family from rural Pennsylvania to Brookhaven, Maine. Saying we were forced to move isn't really accurate. My parents were over the moon. Within a month, we went from a cramped, run-down home in a struggling neighborhood to an enormous house in one of the most picturesque small towns in New England. As for me, I didn't really care. I wasn't leaving behind lifelong friends or anything. I'd always been a quiet, introverted kid. My parents later told me they saw the move as a fresh start for me, a chance to open up and make connections. But at the time, I was just along for the ride. The house was huge. I didn't appreciate it much back then, but even at 10, I could tell we wouldn't be struggling anymore. The best part, though, was the backyard. It had this massive hedge maze where my brothers, Sean and Eric, and I would play hide and seek, but our favorite feature, by far, was the treehouse. I say treehouse, but that doesn't really do it justice. It wasn't some rickety platform nailed to a tree. It was a fortress. 3 levels, a real wooden staircase, and 6 or 7 trees supporting it like thick wooden pillars. Whoever built it knew what they were doing. For a while, we played in the treehouse every single day. It was our kingdom. But eventually, my brothers outgrew it. They hit that dreaded teenage phase where nothing was cool anymore, and suddenly, I was the only one still going up there. At first, it made me sad, but that all changed the day I found the first note. It was folded neatly and tucked into the corner of the treehouse. The handwriting was large and uneven, like a kid's. "Hello, I'm the Marshmallow Man. Nice to meet you. What's your name?" I grinned. This had to be one of my brothers messing with me, trying to lure me back into playing with them. There was a stack of blank paper in the treehouse that hadn't been there before, so I grabbed a marker and wrote back. "I'm Ben. Who are you?" I left the note where I'd found the first one, excited to see how this game would unfold. For the next few days, it continued. Each time I got home from school, I'd run straight to the treehouse, and sure enough, another note was waiting for me. At first, the messages were playful, just small talk, the kind of thing my brothers would say. But then, things started to get weird. The Marshmallow Man began asking personal questions. What's your favorite time of day to play outside? What do you usually eat for breakfast? And then, one that still makes me sick when I think about it. Which window in the house is your bedroom? Even then, I didn't think much of it. I assumed it was still my brother's, so I kept playing along. But the next note changed everything. What do your pajamas smell like? I remember feeling uneasy for the first time. I took the note inside, furious, and confronted my brothers. They burst out laughing when I accused them, then quickly denied everything. "There's no marshmallow man, dude," Sean scoffed. "You're playing pretend by yourself." I could tell they weren't lying. A cold, uneasy feeling settled in my stomach. That night, the tapping started. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Tap, tap, tap. Right against my bedroom window. I froze. I wanted to move, wanted to pull the blanket over my head and pretend I hadn't heard it. But I couldn't. The tapping continued for what felt like hours. Eventually, I forced myself to sleep. The next morning, when I finally got the courage to pull back the curtain, I nearly screamed. Marshmallows. Dozens of sticky, white marshmallows were taped to the outside of my window. I stormed downstairs, furious. This had to be my brothers. This was not funny anymore. But instead of confronting them again, I hatched a plan. That night, I lay in bed pretending to be asleep waiting. The tapping started right on time. I flung the curtains open instantly, ready to catch them in the act. But it wasn't my brothers. It was him. A man, an old, disgusting man, stood outside my window. His yellow eyes glowed in the dim porch light. His teeth were rotting, his hair was patchy, and his lips curled into a grin when he saw me. I screamed, a scream so loud that my parents came running. But by the time they reached my room, he was gone. The police searched our property all night. They combed through the yard, the treehouse, even the neighborhood, but they never found him. Some of the neighbors came out, horrified when my parents told them what had happened. The police took the notes in as evidence, but I doubt they ever did anything with them. The man never came back. My parents told me never to play in the treehouse again, but after that night, I wouldn't have dreamed of setting foot in it. I moved out of that house years ago, but my parents still live there, and every time I visit, I make sure to take a long, careful look at the treehouse. Even now, as a grown man, I can't shake the feeling that something wrong still lingers up there. Maybe it's just paranoia. Or maybe the Marshmallow Man is still waiting for me. I'm a sophomore in college, but I still go home every chance I get. Even if it's just for a weekend, I take any excuse to escape the cramped dorms and city chaos of Los Angeles. My parents still live in my childhood home, tucked away in a quiet Delaware suburb, the kind of place where nothing ever really happens. Or at least, that's what I thought. This happened last October during fall break. I flew home for a few days, hoping for some peace and relaxation. Instead, I got the most terrifying night of my life. There's one thing you should know about my parents. They're insanely strict. They still see me as a kid, which means no drinking, no staying out late, and definitely no smoking. They would lose their minds if they knew I smoked weed, even though it's legal now. So, whenever I visit home, I have to sneak around. And I have the perfect spot for it. The tree house in our front yard. It's been there since I was a kid, weathered, creaky, but still sturdy. It's high up in the trees, practically invisible unless you know exactly where to look. From up there, I can see everything. The yard, the street, even a few windows of the house. But no one can see me. That treehouse was my escape growing up. And that night, it almost got me killed. It was Saturday night, and my parents were out at a charity banquet that was going to run late. I took my chance. I grabbed my stash, climbed up into the treehouse, and settled in. It was chilly, and I could see my breath in the air. I sat back, enjoying the silence, watching the streetlights flicker through the branches. It was peaceful. Then, the light in the house turned on. I froze. My parents weren't supposed to be home yet. I squinted, trying to see through the window. And then, movement in the backyard. I saw them. 3 hooded figures. They moved quickly, circling the property. My stomach dropped. They weren't just wandering. They were looking for a way inside. I watched in horrified silence as the three figures made their way toward the front steps. Then, a fourth figure appeared inside the house. Someone was already in there, and they were unlocking the front door. I felt my chest tighten. I knew what I was witnessing. My house was being robbed, and I was trapped. I wanted to run, but if I climbed down, they'd see me. If I stayed put, they might never know I was there. I forced myself to breathe, gripping my phone with shaking hands. Some subconscious part of me clicked, and before I even realized what I was doing, I had dialed 911. I whispered into the phone, trying to stay calm. "There are intruders in my house. 4 of them. Please hurry." I hung up, heart pounding, and that's when I made a fatal mistake. As I tucked my phone away, the light from the screen caught the eye of one of the men outside. He whipped his head up and locked eyes with me. I ducked, my pulse slamming against my ribs. 3 seconds later, a voice called out from below. "Hey!" Footsteps. Fast, heavy footsteps coming straight for the tree. I peeped over the edge just in time to see the man start climbing the ladder. My body went cold. I barely had time to think. I did the only thing I could. I grabbed my bomb, the only thing within reach, and threw it as hard as I could. It smashed into his head, shattering on impact. He let out a grunt of pain, lost his grip, and fell backwards onto the ground. I expected him to get up. Instead, he crawled away, cursing loudly, before scrambling to his feet and bolting toward the house. I held my breath, heart hammering. Then I saw all 4 of them running toward the backyard fence. They disappeared into the night. 3 minutes later, the police arrived. I was shaking so badly as I climbed down that I nearly collapsed. I tried to explain everything, but my words kept stumbling over themselves. The officers swept the house, clearing every room. They didn't take anything. That's when one of the cops turned to me and said something that still haunts me. "This wasn't random. They knew your parents would be out tonight." That realization hit me like a punch to the gut. This was planned. They had been watching us. They knew we'd be gone. What they didn't know was that I was still here. I barely slept for the rest of my trip. Even now, back at school, I can't stop thinking about it. I can't stop wondering. What if I hadn't been there? Would they have waited for my parents to come home? Would they have done something worse? I don't know. And I don't want to. I just hope this was the last we ever hear of them. But if I ever get another call from my parents in the middle of the night, I don't think I'll be able to answer. I don't live the most exciting life, but whenever someone asks me for a scary story, this is the one I tell. I was 15 at the time, about to start my sophomore year of high school. I grew up in a small coastal town, one of those places packed with tourists in the summer, but practically deserted once the season ended. The kind of town where the boardwalk lights flickered out in September, the restaurants closed their doors, and the only sounds at night were the waves and the occasional rustle of wind through the empty streets. If you've never been to the shore during the off-season, I highly recommend it. It's peaceful in a way that doesn't feel entirely natural, like the calm before a storm. Our house was on a quiet street called Driftwood Avenue, just a block from the beach. Funny enough, I actually knew how to surf. It would have been pretty embarrassing to live on Driftwood and not know how to ride a wave. The ocean was in my blood. The boardwalk, the salt air, the endless stretch of sand. It wasn't just part of my daily routine. It was part of me. I don't live in that house anymore, but my family still owns the property. It still feels like a piece of me is locked inside those walls. At the time, I was on my high school's varsity cross-country team, obsessed with keeping in shape, even during the off-season. Summers on the coast were brutal, so I had a strict running schedule, early morning or late at night. Any other time, and I'd either be drenched in sweat or dodging slow-walking tourists with sunburns. That night, I decided on a late run. I'd stayed up late with some friends the night before and slept in, so I didn't really have a choice. I never brought my phone when I ran. I hated not having music, but even the slightest weight change threw off my rhythm. Instead, I had this old Garmin watch, one of those clunky, outdated models that only tracked distance and pace. The only other thing I carried was my house key, which I stuffed in my shorts pocket. My parents were obsessive about keeping the house locked, even though the town was safe. It was one of those strict, non-negotiable rules that never made sense to me. But I didn't argue. I just took my key every time and moved on. That night, I stuck to the boardwalk. The planks were soft enough to cushion my stride, but solid enough to keep my pace steady. Running in the sand was good for endurance, but after the long day I'd had, I wasn't in the mood for a challenge. After a few miles, I hit my stride. My mind slipped into that euphoric runner's high, that perfect rhythm where you forget you're even running. My breathing evened out. The only sounds were the slap of my sneakers on the wood and the distant crash of waves. Then I heard it. A clink. I slowed down, patted my pocket, and felt nothing. My stomach dropped. I crouched, peering through the gaps in the boardwalk. It was useless. It was pitch black underneath, a cavern of splintered wood and sand. I could barely see my own hands, let alone a tiny silver key. Shit. I actually yelled, not just a curse under my breath, but a full-on shout of frustration. The adrenaline was still pumping, and I was pissed. This was supposed to be a perfect run. Now I was stuck on a stupid detour. And worse, if I showed up at home without that key, my parents would kill me. I took a deep breath, clenched my jaw, and jumped off the boardwalk onto the sand below. Pride played a part too. I wasn't just going to walk away from one of my own belongings. The moment I landed, the smell hit me. Rotting seaweed, stale beer, decay. It was suffocating, like stepping into a sealed-off basement full of mold. The best way I can describe it. Imagine filling a bathtub with old seaweed and beer, letting it sit in the sun for a few weeks, and then dunking your head in. The air was thick with it. Every step I took kicked up trash, crushed cans, damp paper, cigarette butts buried in the sand. I had no flashlight, just the backlight on my watch, which barely did anything. I crouched near the spot where I thought the key had fallen, ran my fingers through the sand. Nothing, just damp, clumped up seaweed and broken glass. And then, a rustling sound. Not the wind, not the ocean, something else, something breathing. I'll say it again, it was disgusting, but I needed those keys. For a second, I thought about just giving up, walking away, but then I thought about how I'd already come this far. If I left now, I'd just be covered in filth for nothing. I started shifting the sand around, hoping the key had just gotten buried. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Frustration crept in. Had I really misjudged where it had fallen that badly? That had to be the explanation. I must have miscalculated. I climbed back onto the boardwalk, retraced my steps, and tried to figure out how to pinpoint the exact spot underneath. That's when I had an idea, a genius idea, at least in my teenage mind. I knelt down, untied my shoelace, and let it dangle through the gap in the planks. That way, I could crawl back under and spot it from below, no problem. But as I was standing up, something tugged on the lace, hard, and in an instant, it vanished into the crack. I froze. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't me moving weirdly. Someone, was under the boardwalk. I stared at the space where my shoelace had been, my pulse hammering in my ears. And then, the realization hit me. Whoever was under there probably had my keys too. My first instinct was to run, to get the hell home and figure it out later. But then my stomach twisted. My keys had my house address etched onto them. I couldn't just let some stranger have that kind of access. I still don't know why I did what I did next. Call it teenage stupidity. Call it misplaced confidence. But I took a deep breath and jumped back down into the sand. The second time under the boardwalk, everything felt different. The air was heavier. It smelled worse. And I wasn't just crawling under there to find my keys anymore. I was preparing myself for a fight. I moved forward, my hands pressing into damp, sticky sand. Somewhere ahead, I heard a faint shuffling sound. I froze. Someone was moving. I swung my watch's backlight toward the noise. Nothing, just more sand and wooden beams. Then I heard it again, but this time it was behind me. That's when I realized the sound wasn't coming from one person. There were multiple people under there. A sharp, ice-cold wave of panic rolled over me. What the hell had I been thinking? What was I going to do? Fight some drug addict living under the boardwalk? This was suicide. Common sense slammed into me like a freight train. I needed to get out now. I turned to crawl out, trying not to panic. But before I could reach the opening, a hand latched onto my ankle. Ice cold, rough, nails digging into my skin. I screamed. The pain was instant, sharp. My body reacted before my brain did. I kicked as hard as I could. My foot connected with something solid. Whoever it was let go. I didn't stop to think. I scrambled forward, my knees and arms scraping against splintered wood. My breath came in ragged gasps as I threw myself into the open air. And then I ran. I sprinted home so fast my lungs burned, the sand slipping under my feet. I didn't stop until I reached my house. I pounded on the door until my dad yanked it open. To say he was pissed would be an understatement. He was furious. But before he could explode on me, I blurted out everything. The lost keys, the shoelace, the people under the boardwalk, the hand. My mom came downstairs, equally pissed at first, but then she saw the red marks on my ankle. Her face shifted from anger to fear. My dad didn't waste time. He called the police. The next morning, a locksmith came to change all the locks. For a few days, everything felt normal again. I tried to convince myself that it was over, that it was just some weird, messed up encounter with a homeless guy living under there. But then, 3 days later, I woke up to loud knocking at the front door. It was early, way too early for visitors. I lay there for a minute, waiting for my parents to answer it. But after a few more knocks, I realized no one was getting up. I sighed, pulled on a hoodie, and went downstairs. As I approached the door, I hesitated. Something felt off. I looked through the peephole. Nothing. I opened the door slowly, peering out onto the porch. No one was there. I stepped outside, looking up and down the street. No cars. No people. Just the morning mist rolling in from the ocean. Just as I was about to turn back inside, I saw it. A shoelace. Sitting neatly on the welcome mat. My shoelace. The one from that night. I slammed the door shut and locked it. We installed a security system that afternoon. For weeks after, my family lived in constant fear, but nothing ever happened again. Even now, years later, I still think about it. And the part that creeps me out the most, some random stranger out there still knows exactly where our beach house is. Hey everyone, I put a lot of effort and heart into creating these videos just for you. If you're enjoying the content, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a quick comment below and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Your support means the world to me, and it keeps me motivated to bring more awesome videos your way. My first brush with sleep paralysis happened when I was just 12 years old. Back then, my younger sister and I shared a large bed in our cozy bedroom. It was a typical night until I woke up to find the entire room bathed in an eerie green glow. At first, I was in awe, gazing around the room and out the window at the usual city lights twinkling brightly in the distance. But then, I noticed something was wrong. I couldn't move. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't budge a single part of my body. Desperation set in. I looked over at my sister, sleeping peacefully beside me, and tried to call for my mom. But the words wouldn't come out. My voice barely made a sound. A weak, almost inaudible whimper. Panic surged through me as I fought with all my might to break free. At one point, I thought I had managed to raise my arms. I could even feel my fingertips brushing against my shoulders. But when I glanced down, my arms were still firmly by my sides. It was terrifying. The ordeal seemed to last forever, though in reality, it might have been just 5 or 10 minutes. With no other choice, I lay still, hoping the nightmare would pass. Eventually, I drifted back to sleep, and by morning, I woke up perfectly fine. I'm 31 now, but that night, 19 years ago, is still vivid in my memory. My second experience came a few years later, around the age of 15. By then, my family had moved to a new house, and I had my own bedroom. One sunny morning, I woke up late with the bright sunlight pouring in through my window. I was lying on my back, feeling relaxed, until I tried to move. Once again, I found myself completely paralyzed, though this time the sensation was different. There was a warm, heavy weight pressing down on my back, almost like one of those soothing back massagers. As I lay there, I heard something that made the moment even stranger. Mechanical voices speaking in tones that were definitely not human. I couldn't make out the words, but it sounded like a conversation. Many voices overlapping, murmuring around me. Oddly enough, I wasn't terrified this time. If anything, I was curious. The experience didn't last long, maybe 5 minutes, before I drifted back to sleep and woke up feeling fine. I seem to recall 1 or 2 similar incidents around the same time, but they blurred in my memory over the years. One particular episode stood out. I was lying on my side with that same warm, heavy sensation on my back, but this time I felt an unmistakable presence. It was as though someone, or something, was there with me. I couldn't see anyone, but the sensation was so vivid that it stayed with me. Surprisingly, I wasn't too scared. It was more puzzling. Years went by without any major incidents, and I thought I had left these experiences behind. But a few years ago, they started again. As I lay there, caught in that strange limbo between waking and sleeping, I noticed something odd, my TV remote control, sitting just within reach of my right hand. For reasons I still can't explain, grabbing that remote felt like the most important thing in the world at that moment. So I fought. I pushed against the invisible weight holding me down, inching my hand closer until I could finally grasp it. Victory, or so I thought. With great effort, I managed to place the remote in the small opening of my headboard, feeling an odd sense of accomplishment. I hadn't regained full control of my body, but that small movement felt like a triumph over the paralysis. Exhausted, I drifted back into sleep, only to wake up a little while later feeling normal again. Later that evening, as I prepared to settle back into my room, I went to retrieve the remote from where I had placed it during my struggle, but to my surprise, it wasn't there. Instead, I found it on the opposite side of the bed, right where it had been before I took my nap. I stood there for a moment, staring in disbelief. That tiny but intense moment during my episode, reaching for the remote, feeling it in my hand, had felt so real. Yet, it hadn't happened at all. This experience convinced me of one thing. I had been dreaming during the paralysis. The vividness of the dream had blurred the lines between reality and imagination. I could feel every detail so clearly, the shape of the remote in my hand, the effort it took to move, but it was all in my mind. Not long ago, I came across a medical documentary about sleep paralysis. As I watched, I was stunned by how accurately it described my own experiences, down to the smallest details. The sudden inability to move, the vivid sensations, the strange mix of fear and awareness. It all matched perfectly. But what shocked me even more were the extreme cases they covered. For some people, sleep paralysis involves terrifying hallucinations, shadowy figures, demonic presences, levitation, and even alien encounters. Compared to those, my episodes seemed almost tame. Still, I couldn't help but wonder, why do we experience such vivid and sometimes terrifying things during sleep paralysis? The answer, I believe, lies in the powerful connection between our minds and our cultural influences. A good friend of mine once shared his own story of sleep paralysis. He told me about a recurring vision of a dark shadow sitting on his chest, making it hard for him to breathe. In his Hmong culture, this figure is believed to be an evil spirit, punishing those who have been overly prideful. The weight on his chest, the suffocating sensation, it all fit perfectly into the cultural narrative he had grown up with. When I explained to him that this was likely just a symptom of sleep paralysis, he was relieved. Since then, he hasn't had any more episodes. It made me realize how much our cultural upbringing shapes the way we perceive these experiences. Whether it's an evil spirit, an alien abduction, or a figure from folklore, our minds fill in the gaps based on what we've been taught to fear. For me, understanding that these episodes were just sleep paralysis changed everything. The more I learned, the less power they had over me. Instead of feeling terrified, I began to approach each experience with curiosity, even amusement. I reminded myself that nothing I was feeling or seeing was real. It was all in my mind. The year was 2020, and the world was shutting down. With COVID forcing everyone into isolation, most people were locked inside their homes. But not me. As an avid backpacker and camper, I saw it as the perfect excuse to explore national parks while avoiding the chaos of society. That's how I ended up camping alone at Shadow Creek, a secluded spot in Rocky Mountain National Park, Colorado. I wasn't just escaping the pandemic, I was escaping my life. Without revealing too much personal information, let's just say 2019 had been the worst year of my life. A mistake I made at work cost a lot of people a lot of money. My reputation was ruined overnight. People despised me. I lost friends. Strangers flooded my phone with threats, forcing me to change apartments, get a new number, and eventually quit my job. For a while, the harassment was relentless. Anonymous texts, unknown calls, even messages on social media. Some were cryptic. Others were downright terrifying. Then suddenly, it stopped. People must have moved on, or so I thought. With nothing tying me down, I spent my time traveling. No job, no obligations. Just me, my backpack, and the open road. That's what led me here, to this moment, hiking into the wilderness alone with no one around for miles. The lockdowns had scared off most travelers, and winter still clung to the air. A thin layer of snow covered the ground, crunching loudly beneath my boots. When I reached the creek, I felt at peace. The water still flowed despite the cold, and the silence of the forest was almost comforting. I wandered off the trail, found a hidden clearing, and set up my tent. After gathering some firewood, I cooked a few sausages over the flames, cracked open a beer, and pulled out my book. The solitude was exactly what I needed. As the sky darkened, I rolled a joint, lit it, and took a few hits, letting the stress melt away. That's when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. 203. Connecticut area code. My heart skipped a beat. The texts had stopped months ago. Could it be happening again? How's the camping trip going, buddy? I stared at the screen. It's beautiful out here. Chills ran down my spine. I see why you came up here. My stomach dropped. The way they phrased it, it was like they were here. I responded immediately. Who is this? No answer. A thick wave of paranoia hit me as I stood up, scanning the trees in every direction. The woods were dark now. Too dark. The fire's glow barely reached the edges of the clearing. I reached into my bag and pulled out my Sig Sauer P365, gripping it tightly. Normally, I'd put the fire out before bed, but I needed the light. I crawled into my tent, zipped it up, and tried to distract myself. I turned on my headlamp, flipped open my book, and pretended to read, but my mind was stuck on those texts. I needed to calm down. So I did what any rational person would do in the middle of the woods after receiving threatening messages. I pulled up YouTube and started watching a true crime documentary. The fire outside had started to die down, the glow flickering lower and lower. The silence was deafening. Then, just as I was about to click on another video, my phone buzzed again. Doesn't matter anymore. I sat up so fast I nearly dropped my phone. How did you know I was camping? No response. At this point, the anxiety was crushing me. Could this be a prank? A family member messing with me? Or was it someone from my past? One of the people who had lost money because of my mistake? And if it was them, how the hell did they know where I was? Another hour passed. My fire had dwindled to embers, and the silence in the forest felt wrong. Then, footsteps. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Slow, deliberate, approaching my tent. I froze. The footsteps stopped 6 feet from where I lay. The only thing separating me from whoever was out there was a thin sheet of nylon fabric. Then, a flash. A camera flash. They took a picture. I gripped my gun tighter, my finger hovering over the safety. My breath was shallow. My heart hammered in my chest. Then, without warning, the footsteps retreated, slow, calculated, fading into the trees. My phone vibrated. I didn't want to look. I already knew what it was. A photo. A picture of my tent. And then, a final text. Have a good night's sleep. A switch flipped inside me. Fear was replaced by rage. I unzipped my tent and fired 2 shots into the air. The sound echoed through the forest, and from somewhere in the darkness, I heard rapid footsteps running. I wasn't alone. They had been watching me. I yelled into the night, a warning laced with venom. Then, silence. No more texts. No more footsteps. No more watching. I sat awake for hours, gun in hand, waiting for something, anything. The adrenaline coursed through me so hard I felt like I chugged 3 cups of coffee. At some point, exhaustion won. When I woke up to sunlight, I finally exhaled. Whoever had been out there, they weren't ready for me to be armed. And they must have known it, because after that night, they never contacted me again. It's been almost 5 years now, and I haven't heard from them since. But to this day, I still wonder, what would have happened if I hadn't brought my gun? It happened one cold evening when I was visiting my aunt and cousin in Montana. The phone rang, and it was my mom on the other end. Her voice was soft, tinged with sadness, as she told me that our beloved cat, General, had passed away. I felt a sharp ache in my chest. General had been with us for years, and the thought of not seeing him again was devastating. A week later, when I returned home to Colorado, I was still feeling the weight of that loss. I was sitting alone in the living room, watching TV, trying to distract myself from the emptiness. That's when I heard it, a faint, familiar scratching noise coming from the kitchen. It stopped me in my tracks. General used to make that exact noise, the way he scratched the floor when he wanted attention. For a moment, I froze, thinking I must be imagining it. But curiosity got the better of me. I stood up and walked toward the kitchen. And there he was. General sat there, just like he always did, his sleek fur and bright eyes as real as I remembered. He didn't look like a ghost or some shadowy figure. He looked alive, as though I could reach out and pet him. I was overwhelmed with disbelief. I blinked, took a hesitant step forward, but the moment I got closer, he was gone, just like that. I didn't tell anyone about it that night. How could I? It sounded ridiculous, even to me. A few days later, my mom began mentioning something strange. She kept complaining about hearing scratching noises outside her bedroom door at exactly 3 a.m. at first. She thought it was either me or my twin brother playing some kind of prank. But one weekend, while my brother and I were staying at our dad's house, miles away from hers, she heard it again. She told me later that the realization hit her like a ton of bricks. Something was in the house. Her first thought was mice, but she quickly dismissed that. It was the dead of winter, and we'd never had a problem with pests before. When I returned from my dad's house, my mom and I were sitting on the couch, watching a movie together. The mood was light, and for a moment, we weren't thinking about General or the strange noises. Suddenly, my mom jolted upright, her eyes fixed on the kitchen. I followed her gaze but didn't see anything, until she started yelling. "Bree, it's General. He's in the kitchen," she stammered, her voice trembling. I felt my heart race. She had seen him too. This wasn't just my imagination. General was here, somehow, in our home. Over the next 3 years, General appeared to us on and off, always in quiet moments. Sometimes it was just a glimpse of him sitting by the window or walking down the hall. Other times, it was the scratching noise as if he was still trying to get our attention. And then, just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. No more sightings, no more noises. It was as though he had finally moved on. 8 months ago, we moved to California, starting fresh in a new home. My mom and I have joked, half seriously, that maybe General will find us here too. It's been a week since we moved in, and there hasn't been any sign of him yet. But deep down, we both have this feeling, this quiet certainty. If anyone could find their way back, it's General. Sorry to interrupt. If you're enjoying the story, let me know in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. When I visit my brother in Florida, I prefer to drive at night. No congestion, no stop and go madness, just open roads and silence. I live in Long Island, New York, and the drive to Florida is a brutal 18 hours. It's easier if I leave at 2:00 a.m., so I can get out of the high traffic areas before the morning rush. It was a Thursday night when I started my drive. First stop, Dunkin' Donuts for coffee. No way was I doing this trip without caffeine. By the time I got off Long Island, it was after 3:00 a.m., smooth sailing. Once you're out of New York, you just take the I-95 straight down. At 4:00 a.m., I felt the hunger creeping in. I spotted a food sign on the interstate and saw there was a Wendy's off the next exit. Sounded good to me. I pulled off, following the dimly lit road toward the restaurant. That's when I realized something unsettling. There were no streetlights here, no other cars, no businesses open, just thick trees and my headlights cutting through the darkness. The Wendy's parking lot had one car in it, a dark-colored sedan parked near the tree line. Some of the building's lights were on, and the drive-through menu was lit. I pulled into the drive-through, and I waited, and waited. No voice greeted me through the intercom. I sighed, grabbed my phone, and looked up the location. And wouldn't you know it, this Wendy's didn't open until 6:00 a.m. I groaned, about to leave, when suddenly 3 loud knocks hit my driver's side window. I jumped. My heart hammered in my chest. A man stood outside my car, smiling. He gestured for me to roll down my window. Hell no. I cracked it just slightly, enough to hear him. Place isn't open, he said casually. Yeah, I just saw that. Then he said something that sent a shiver down my spine. Hey, my car's dead. Can you help me jump-start it? He pointed toward the sedan parked in the shadows. Every alarm bell in my head went off. I don't have jumper cables, I lied. Oh, don't worry, I do. His smile widened. They're in my trunk. I hesitated. A part of me thought, what if he's actually stranded? I believe in karma, and I didn't want to leave someone hanging if I could help. So, against my better judgment, I agreed. I pulled my car next to his, aligning our hoods. He walked to his trunk, moving slowly, too slowly. When he popped the hood and connected the cables, I started my car again. He got into his driver's seat and tried to start his. Nothing. Weird, he muttered. Let's give it a few more minutes. Something felt off. He stepped away and pulled out his phone. He turned slightly away, muttering in Spanish. I couldn't make out what he was saying, but his voice was low, urgent. Then, 2 pickup trucks appeared. They came from opposite sides of the building, engines roaring, speeding toward us. My stomach dropped. Oh, asterisk. I yanked off the jumper cables, slammed my hood shut, and bolted back into my car. But it was too late. The 2 trucks blocked me in. The man was still smiling, but now his smile was different. Something dark, sinister. I barely had time to react. I grabbed my keys, locked my doors, and ran. Not to my car. To the woods. Branches slashed my arms and face as I sprinted into the trees. Behind me, I heard shouting. At least 3 voices, all in Spanish. I didn't know if they had weapons. I didn't know how many of them there were. I just knew I had to stay quiet. I tripped over something, landing hard on my side. My breath hitched. I forced myself to stay still. The voices got closer. I pressed my body flat against the ground, barely breathing. Then, the voices started to fade. A wave of relief started to wash over me, until I heard something that made my stomach turn. My car alarm. They were breaking into my car. I crept toward the edge of the woods, just enough to see the parking lot. The 2 pickup trucks were gone. The man's car, gone. Only my car remained, and my rear window was shattered. I ran to it, already knowing what I'd find. Everything was gone. My suitcase, my shoes, my clothes, hundreds of dollars worth of stuff. My entire month's worth of belongings stolen. I started shaking, not out of anger, not out of sadness, but out of pure, raw terror. I called the police. They arrived within minutes. The officers took my report. When they ran the plates for the abandoned sedan, they found something chilling. Fake license plates. No way to track them. The pickup trucks? No plates at all. The officer admitted there wasn't much they could do. I knew, deep down, those guys were long gone. I turned around and drove home. It was the longest, most stressful drive of my life. I kept checking my rearview mirror, half expecting to see those headlights again. I never did. But I'll tell you one thing. I'll never, ever stop to help someone in an empty parking lot again. We've all been there. You're on a long road trip, your legs are cramping, your bladder is screaming at you, and you're counting the miles until the next rest stop. Sometimes you're lucky and find a big, well-lit one, the kind with restaurants, vending machines, and a dozen families stretching their legs. But other times, you're stuck with a tiny, desolate stop in the middle of nowhere. And that's where I found myself that night. It was a 15-hour drive, most of it overnight. I won't say where exactly, but let's just say it was somewhere along the East Coast in a dead stretch of highway where no one should be at that hour. There were barely any cars on the road. I felt like I was the only person alive in that endless black void of asphalt and trees. Then, finally, a blue highway sign with the words, Rest Area 2 miles, a lifesaver. I pulled off the interstate and into the lot. It was small, just a single dimly lit building with men's and women's restrooms. No vending machines, no security cameras. Only one other car in the lot. And it was parked way off to the side, its windows tinted so dark I couldn't see inside. I considered the possibility that someone was sleeping inside. Didn't matter. I had to pee. I got out of my car, stretched, and made my way to the bathroom. As soon as I stepped inside, I froze, because standing in the far corner of the room, with his back facing me, was a man. At first, I assumed he was at a urinal, but then I noticed something off. He wasn't facing a urinal. He was just standing there, staring at the wall, not moving, not making a sound. Something about the unnatural stillness of his body sent chills up my spine. I hesitated. Should I say something? Ask if he's okay? No way. I kept my head down and hurried into a stall. I locked the door and waited. I don't know why, but I suddenly felt like I couldn't use the bathroom. Like my body was refusing to relax. The air was dead silent. Too silent. I wasn't sure if he was still there. Until I heard it. Shuffling. A quiet scuff of a shoe against tile. And then, a slow, deliberate turn. My heart started hammering. I could see his feet now through the gap under the stall. He had turned around, and he was facing my stall. Not moving. Not speaking. Just watching. Every hair on my body stood up. I swallowed hard and finally forced myself to speak. Someone's in here. Silence. No response. I stared at those motionless feet beneath the door, my pulse pounding in my ears. Something was very, very wrong. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and dialed 911. As soon as the operator answered, I put the call on speaker. 911, what's your emergency? I spoke loudly, not just for them, but for him. I'm being followed by a dangerous man. I feel threatened. I prayed that the sound of the dispatcher's voice would scare him off. And thank God, because those feet turned again, and I heard footsteps leaving the restroom. I stayed inside until I heard a knock on the door. A voice called out, "Police." Only then did I force myself to move. When I stepped outside, the officer had already swept the area, but the stranger was gone. I told them everything. The other car in the lot, the way he was standing, how he turned to face me without saying a word. We checked my car. Nothing had been touched. The officer waited while I got back into my vehicle and pulled onto the interstate. I kept checking my rearview mirror the entire time, but I never saw him again. Still, to this day, I don't know what his intentions were, but I know one thing. He wasn't in that restroom to use the toilet. When my youngest son, Luke, left for college last fall, I thought I'd welcome the quiet. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, my house was empty. No more muddy footprints on the kitchen tile. No more video game sounds leaking from under his door. Just silence. At first, I told myself I liked it, but now I don't know. Something about the quiet has unlocked an old memory, one I'd buried for years, and now, no matter how hard I try, I can't stop thinking about it. Luke was 8 years old when it happened. At the time, I was still full of energy, always busy, always working on some new project around the house. I'm a carpenter by trade, and one of my proudest builds was the treehouse I made for Luke in our backyard. This wasn't some flimsy little thing nailed to a tree. It had 4 solid walls, a real wooden ladder, even a tiny roof to keep the rain out. I wanted it to feel like his own little house, a safe place just for him. My wife, Christy, wasn't thrilled about it at first. She worried it was too high, that he'd fall and hurt himself. But Luke was a climber by nature. He was always scrambling up trees and fences, so I figured giving him a sturdy ladder was safer than letting him scale brittle branches. Eventually, Christy came around, and Luke loved that treehouse. For a long time, everything seemed normal. Our house was at the end of a dead-end road, bordered by a thick stretch of woods. It was private, which we liked, but looking back, maybe we were too isolated. Luke spent hours in that treehouse, playing and talking to himself like kids do. Then, one day, he mentioned Jake. "Who's Jake?" I asked, tossing a baseball with him one evening. "My friend," Luke said simply. Christy and I assumed Jake was an imaginary friend. That wasn't too weird, except for one thing. Luke had never been the type to make imaginary friends. It was out of character for him. Christy thought it was cute. I wasn't so sure. And then, things got strange. Luke started spending more and more time in the treehouse. Not just an hour or two, entire afternoons. He never brought toys or books up there, just himself. At first, I figured he was just enjoying the independence. Then, one evening, as I was tucking him into bed, I asked, "Why don't you ever invite Jake inside?" Luke hesitated. Then, in a whisper, he said, "He doesn't like coming inside." A chill crawled up my spine. I tried to laugh it off. "Why not?" "He says he belongs to the woods," Luke muttered, pulling his blanket up. "And that's where we have to play." I don't know why, but that bothered me. A few days later, something even stranger happened. Luke came home with a black eye. I pulled him aside. "What happened?" Luke looked down at his shoes. "I got in a fight." "With who?" He hesitated. Then, in a small, frightened voice, he whispered, "Jake." I frowned. "Buddy, Jake isn't real." Luke snapped his head up, eyes wide with fear. "Yes, He is. I didn't know what to say. That night, Christy and I had a long talk. She thought it was normal childhood imagination, that Luke had made up Jake as a way to process being alone. I wasn't convinced. I decided to check the treehouse myself. The next morning, while Luke was at school, I climbed up and peeked inside. I immediately felt sick. The floor was littered with dirty socks and sneakers, kids' shoes that didn't belong to Luke, food wrappers, empty plates, utensils. Someone had been living in there. Worst of all, the walls were covered in drawings. Not childish scribbles, detailed sketches of wild animals. A fox, a bear, a deer. And in the center, a massive spider with a human face. My stomach lurched. I stormed inside and confronted Luke. He wouldn't look at me. "Where did those shoes come from?" I demanded. "Jake needs shoes," he whispered. I felt cold. "Luke, where did you get them?" His hands tightened into fists. "He needs them, Dad. He forgets things." That night, I banned him from the treehouse. No more playing up there. No more Jake. I told him he'd taken things too far. I told Christy that, if this continued, we'd take him to a doctor. But the very next night, I saw something that changed everything. I was getting ready for bed when I happened to glance out the window and saw movement near the treehouse. At first, I thought Luke had disobeyed me, but then I realized it wasn't him. It was a boy, a thin, frail-looking child climbing down the ladder. My breath hitched. His clothes were tattered and filthy. He moved like he hadn't eaten in days. He wasn't Luke, and he wasn't one of the neighborhood kids. I threw on my shoes and bolted outside. "Hey!" I shouted. The boy whipped his head toward me. For a split second, I saw his face, hollow, sunken cheeks, wide, dark eyes. Then he sprinted toward the woods. I chased him, but he was too fast. Within seconds, he disappeared into the trees. We called the police. They searched the woods for hours, but they found nothing. And when they questioned Luke, his answer made my blood run cold. "Jake lives in the woods with his friends," Luke whispered. "What friends?" I asked. "Them." He gestured toward the animal drawings on the treehouse walls. Fox, bear, spider. I felt sick. "Luke," I said slowly, "did Jake ever ask you to go into the woods with him?" Luke hesitated. Then in the smallest voice he whispered, "Every time." That was the last time we ever saw Jake. To this day, Christy swears Jake wasn't human, that he was something else. Something from the woods. I don't know what I believe, but sometimes when the house gets too quiet, I think about that night, and I wonder, what if Luke had said yes? I don't have the most exciting life, but it's comfortable. I'm 40, single, no kids. Some people might find that depressing, but I don't mind. I've got a steady job, a decent house, and no one to answer to but myself. I work as a bartender at a high-end rooftop lounge in a neighboring town, the kind of place where people wear designer suits, drop hundreds on cocktails, and act like regular bars are beneath them. I don't live anywhere near that level of luxury. My place is in a middle-class neighborhood about 20 minutes away. The job has perks, though. The tips are insane, and the ever-changing crowd keeps things interesting. Unlike a dive bar, we don't have many regulars, just businessmen, trust fund kids, and socialites passing through. That's the way I like it. I never quite liked when customers got too familiar with me. Maybe I'm just wired that way. I should probably mention that my name's Kevin. That'll be important later. It was a Friday night, our busiest shift. The place was packed, groups clinking glasses, couples on fancy dates, and the usual crowd of rich guys pretending they belong. I always play a little game, trying to guess who's faking it. You can tell by their drink orders. The ones who request overcomplicated cocktails, they're trying too hard. The ones who order whiskey neat, they've had a long day. I was pouring a round of gin and tonics when I noticed him. A guy had just walked in, and he looked wildly out of place. I clocked him immediately. Greasy black hair, a faded leather jacket covered in stains, and an expression that could curdle milk. He wasn't just pissed off, he looked furious. I had no idea how he got past the doorman. He beelined straight for the bar, but didn't sit. Just stood there staring at me. I cleared my throat, keeping my tone neutral. "Can I get you something?" He didn't answer at first. He just glared like he was seconds away from swinging at me. Finally, he muttered, "Double shot of Jaeger." Odd choice. We don't pour a lot of Jaeger here. It's not exactly a high-end drink, but whatever. I grabbed a glass, poured the shot, and set it in front of him. When I came back to charge him, he shoved crumpled cash onto the counter. Nobody pays in cash at this place. I was about to move on when he spoke again. His voice was low. "I knew I'd find you here, Kevin." I froze. My eyes snapped to his. "How do you know my name?" He didn't answer, just kept glaring with that same seething rage. Then he said something that made my stomach drop. "I know what you did." Before I could respond, he turned and walked straight to the elevator. I stood there stunned. My brain scrambled for any possible explanation. I didn't recognize him. Had we met before? Was he confusing me with someone else? I'm not perfect, but I don't go around making enemies. The rest of my shift was ruined. I was completely thrown off, barely making it through the night. By the time I drove home, my brain was still racing, replaying the scene over and over. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up for no reason. I wasn't sure what had disturbed me. No sounds, no light, just that uneasy feeling that something wasn't right. I kept my eyes open, adjusting to the darkness. Then I saw it. A dark figure standing in the corner of my room, next to the door, motionless. A bolt of pure terror shot through me. I forced myself to stay still, pretending to be asleep. My heart pounded so loud I swore it would give me away. Someone was in my room. I counted to 3 in my head. Then I sprang up, screaming like a lunatic. The figure bolted for the door. As he moved, something clattered to the floor, a metallic sound. I chased him through the house, but by the time I reached the front door, it was wide open, and he was gone. I hesitated before stepping outside. What if he was waiting for me? Instead, I slammed the door shut and locked it. Then I remembered the clatter. I turned on the bedroom light and felt my stomach twist. Lying on the floor, near where he had been standing. A knife, one of mine, from the kitchen. I called the police immediately. They arrived fast, searching the house and yard. Nothing. No broken windows. No forced entry. Nothing. I gave them the description of the man from the bar. They pulled footage from security cameras at work, but they haven't found him yet. Here's the part that keeps me up at night. I know I locked the doors before going to bed. Every single one. But the police never figured out how he got inside. Hey everyone, I put a lot of effort and heart into creating these videos just for you. If you're enjoying the content, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a quick comment below and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Your support means the world to me, and it keeps me motivated to bring more awesome videos your way. Every October during my childhood, my family had a tradition. We'd drive up to northern Maine for a weekend getaway. My Uncle Jim owned a 4-acre property nestled deep in the woods, where his rustic cabin stood like something out of an old horror story. The place was huge, 5 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, and enough space for all of us to cram in. 2 of the bedrooms were always reserved for the kids, my brother Adam, my sister Emily, and me in one, while our 4 cousins, Jake, Joe, Christina, and Jamie, shared another. The adults took the remaining rooms. Uncle Jim had always been a big-time hunter and fisherman, the kind of guy who went on camping trips just to hunt elk in Colorado or track deer in the Upper Peninsula. My dad sometimes tagged along, though he was more of an animal lover and wouldn't hurt a fly. Part of Uncle Jim's property was swallowed by thick forest, and he had marked the property line with red paint on trees. Beyond that, just endless county-owned woodland, stretching for miles with no other houses in sight. That year, Adam, Jake, Joe, and I came up with an idea during lunch while our dads swapped hunting stories. We wanted to camp out in the woods that night. Our dads, already a few beers in, thought it was a great idea. Our moms, not so much. They kept saying we were too young to be alone out there. But our dads waved them off, laughing about how we'd be close enough for them to hear our screams if something went wrong. So later that afternoon, Uncle Jim and my dad led us into the forest with a massive 4-person tent. My sister and my girl cousins stayed back. It was just us boys on this mission. We hiked past the property line into a small clearing where soft, mossy ground covered the earth. Uncle Jim called it a deer bed. He said he'd camped there before and that it was perfect. Our dads gave us a half-drunk crash course in setting up the tent, making us help so we'd learn something. By the time it was up, the sun was already beginning to set. We tossed our sleeping bags inside, then hiked back to the house to kill time before nightfall. At dinner, our moms objected one last time. "You're sending them way out there alone," my mom asked, her voice tense. "They'll be fine," my dad smirked, raising his beer. "Hell, we'll probably hear them screaming before they even get lost." We all laughed. It wasn't funny later. That night, our dads led us back into the woods. We each had flashlights, extra blankets, and I had even packed a deck of Uno cards for something to do. Once we got settled in the tent, our dads left us alone. And suddenly, the forest felt different. The woods were thick with silence. No distant voices. No porch lights from the house. Just us. We sat in a circle inside the tent, our flashlights creating strange, moving shadows as we played Uno. We were deep into a game, laughing about something stupid, when a scream split through the trees. A high-pitched, blood-curdling scream. We froze, cards halfway in our hands, eyes locked on each other, all of us hearing the exact same thing. I forced a swallow. "It's probably a fox," I said, voice low. "They sound like screaming women." It was true. Foxes can sound like a person in distress. But Joe, the youngest at 9, looked terrified. My reassurance helped, though, and we went back to our game. We shouldn't have. About 15 minutes later, it happened again. Louder, closer. This time, it didn't sound animal. It sounded human. A woman's scream, sharp, pain-filled, not normal. We dropped the cards. Nobody moved. Nobody even breathed. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears as the forest swallowed the silence again. Joe's eyes welled with tears. "Turn off the flashlights," I whispered. One by one, we clicked them off, and the tent plunged into darkness. We sat in silence, breathing through our mouths, listening. And then, leaves crunching, fast footsteps running toward the tent. Crunch, crunch, crunch. They stopped, right outside. Then, a gut-wrenching, soul-piercing scream. Right next to us, the tent shook violently. Joe let out a sob. Jake and Adam screamed. My own throat locked up in terror. I don't even remember making a sound, just grabbing the zipper of the tent and tearing it open in one motion. "Run!" We bolted into the woods. Our flashlights swung wildly, casting beams of light across the trees, roots, and empty darkness. My legs burned. I half expected to feel hands grabbing at me from behind. We sprinted. We never looked back. We reached the property line in what felt like seconds and hours at the same time, screaming the whole way. By the time we burst into the clearing, our family was already outside, their faces white with shock. I was panting so hard I thought I'd throw up. Someone was outie there. I gasped. They screamed. They shook the tent. My dad and Uncle Jim exchanged serious looks. That's when I realized. Christina, Jamie, and Emily weren't outside. I spun on my dad, accusing him immediately. "You had one of the girls mess with us, right? That was them." But he just shook his head. They're already in bed. Silence. The weight of that hit us all at once. Whoever was out there, we didn't know them. Uncle Jim grabbed his rifle. My dad grabbed his. They vanished into the woods. When they came back 30 minutes later, they had found no one. The next morning, we packed up the tent. We didn't go back into the woods. We didn't play outside after dark. We never even talked about camping out again. Because whatever was out there that night, it wasn't an animal. And we had no idea what it wanted. I was in the 6th grade when this happened. It all started during the week of Halloween, when I stayed after school to help decorate the haunted house for our annual harvest festival. My friends and I had a blast hanging up cobwebs, arranging skeletons, and carving pumpkins. As a bonus, we were rewarded with pizza and soda for our hard work. There was another kid who also stayed late to help. I'll call him Chris. He was funny, easygoing, and got along with everyone. We weren't close, but we talked here and there while working on decorations. He never gave me any reason to feel uneasy. Not yet, anyway. 2 weeks passed. One afternoon, a group of girls from my grade approached me, their eyes gleaming with excitement. Guess what? One of them squealed, "You have a secret admirer." They giggled, barely able to contain their excitement. I felt my heart skip. A secret admirer? It was flattering. Who could it be? That night, as I was getting ready for bed, my phone buzzed with a messenger notification, the only app I used to communicate with my parents when I was home alone. I checked the message. It was from Chris. For a moment, I was confused, then I remembered. I had added him on Facebook during the Halloween festival. His message was short but urgent. "Maya, I need to talk to you." Something about it unsettled me. Why the urgency? I replied immediately. "Yeah, what's up? Everything okay?" I wish I had never responded. The typing bubbles appeared. They stayed there for what felt like forever, at least 2 full minutes. My stomach churned. What was he about to say? Then the message came through. It was a long paragraph, a confession. He told me he had been in love with me since Halloween, that he thought about me constantly, that he had been trying to impress me at recess with his soccer skills, hoping I'd notice, that I was driving him crazy. And then, the final part of the message. "I want you to notice me. So, will you be my girlfriend?" I cringed. Every word made my skin crawl. I barely knew this kid. We had drifted apart weeks ago. I hesitated, trying to think of a way to let him down gently. I didn't want to be mean. "Chris, I don't feel that way about you. I just want to be friends." The moment I sent it, I could tell he didn't take it well. He kept asking why, over and over. Each time I gave a reason, he countered with another question. Until, finally, he stopped responding. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. The next morning, everything changed. Chris had told everyone what happened. Everyone knew he had confessed to me. And worse, he told people that he was going to kiss me, whether I wanted it or not. His friends kept approaching me, grinning. "Chris said he's going to kiss you today. He's just waiting for the right moment. He'll do it even if he has to corner you." My stomach twisted. Was this a joke? Was he serious? It felt like a threat. I told my teacher. She told me to stay inside during recess and lunch. She said that if Chris got anywhere near me, I should run straight back to the classroom. That wasn't enough. I went straight to the principal. He assured me that he would handle it. That gave me a small sense of relief. But Chris knew where I lived. That week, as I walked home from school, I felt like I was being watched. 2 minutes after I stepped inside my house, there was a knock on the door. I froze. Peeking out the window, I caught a blur of movement. Someone ducking behind a parked car across the street. My heart pounded. It had to be him. My mom opened the door, finding a piece of paper on the porch. My hands shook as I picked it up. It was addressed to me. I read it out loud. "There's a surprise waiting for you under the Cadillac." My brother's Cadillac was parked in the driveway. My mom went outside to check. Nothing was there. But from that day forward, the Cadillac wouldn't start. To this day, I don't know what Chris did to that car. The harassment didn't stop. Chris's friends kept pressuring me. Just give him a chance, they insisted. He really likes you. It got worse. One day as I walked home, I heard a faint click behind me. A camera shutter. I whipped around. Chris was standing a few feet away, his phone in his hand. He had just taken a picture of me. My stomach turned. How many pictures had he taken without me knowing? Every morning, I woke up to a new message from him. Can't wait to see you at school today. Bet you'll look beautiful this morning. He wasn't stopping. He wasn't giving up. And now, he knew where I lived. Finally, I got called to the counselor's office. Relief flooded me. They were finally going to do something. Right? I had hoped that going to the counselor would finally put an end to this nightmare. Maybe they'd call his parents. Maybe the police would get involved. Maybe something, anything, would finally be done. Instead, what I heard was so much worse. The counselor leaned forward, giving me a small, almost amused smile. Boys will be boys, she said with a shrug. I just stared at her. She continued, completely unfazed by my fear. They do crazy things when they're in love. You shouldn't be mad about this. I felt like I was losing my mind. You should feel flattered, she added. This kind of stuff is bound to happen. The only thing you can do is accept it and learn from it. I nodded, not knowing what else to do. I didn't argue. I didn't question it. I was 12, and at that moment, I believed her. Looking back now, I realize how sick that was. How disturbing it was to tell a sixth-grade girl who was being stalked and harassed daily that it was somehow normal. That afternoon, I went home and told my mom everything. She was livid. The next day, I was called into the principal's office again. This time, my mother was sitting right beside me. I will never forget the look on her face. She turned to the counselor and the principal, her voice cold and steady. "What are you waiting for?" she asked. "For something bad to happen to my daughter before you finally do something." Silence. "Why is this taking so long? Why is he still allowed near her?" More silence. My mom shook her head. "If anything happens to her, it's on you. And don't you ever, ever, speak to my daughter again unless I'm present." They didn't say a word. The sad thing is, I don't think they ever actually punished Chris. And that enrages me to this day. He got away with everything. But my nightmare wasn't over yet. One weekend, my parents had gone out shopping, leaving me home alone for a couple of hours. I stayed in my room watching a YouTube video on my iPad, slowly getting ready for bed. That's when I heard it. A sound at my window. I froze. I lived on the second floor. The only thing that ever hit my window was the occasional bird flying into it. I sat up listening. Then it happened again. A soft, deliberate thud against the glass. Then again. And again. It was consistent. Intentional. My stomach twisted into knots. I knew. I knew before I even looked. But I still did it. Slowly, I got up and pulled back the curtain. My heart stopped. Chris was standing below. A handful of rocks in his grip. His eyes locked on mine. I watched, horrified, as he lifted another rock, about to throw it, when he suddenly realized I was watching him. His lips moved. He was saying something. I didn't stay to find out what. I bolted from my room, running downstairs, checked every door, every window. Locked. Thank God. When I got back to my room, my phone buzzed. 4 new messages. "Why did you leave? I just want to talk. I'm sorry. All I wanted was a kiss. Please forgive me. You are not who I thought you were. Bye." That was it. I blocked him. And just like that, he stopped. Chris never tried to contact me again. But I still had to see him. Every year. From 6th grade to senior year, I had to walk the same halls as him. Sit in the same classrooms. Pretend he didn't exist. And then, One day, I heard the news. Chris had been arrested. For what? I don't know. I don't want to know. But the most terrifying part of this entire story isn't him. It isn't the stalking or the threats, or even the fact that he knew where I lived. It's the counselor. It's the school. It's the fact that an adult looked me in the eye as I sat there, scared out of my mind, and told me that I should be flattered, that I should just accept it. I can only hope that woman is no longer working with children, and I pray that I never, ever have to see Chris again. The thing about living in a beach town during the off-season is that it feels abandoned. The tourists are long gone, the storefronts are mostly boarded up, and the boardwalk, the heart of the town in summer, is nothing but a skeletal remnant of what it once was. I liked it that way. It was peaceful. That's why, for the longest time, I would go for late-night runs along the boardwalk in the off-season, when no one was around. It was my detox from life, an escape from all the stress that came with it. Sometimes you just need to be away from people. There was something about the sound of the waves crashing against the shore, the rhythmic slap of my sneakers against the wooden planks. It calmed me. Out there, under the dark expanse of the sky, it felt like I had the whole world to myself. Tonight was no different. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of salt and damp wood. The only light came from the occasional street lamp, buzzing faintly, casting long, lonely shadows. I was about a mile in when I got that feeling, that creeping, instinctual sense that I was not alone. I glanced over my shoulder. A man stood in the distance, not walking, not moving, just standing there on the boardwalk, facing me. A cold shiver rolled down my spine. I swallowed hard and turned back around, shaking it off. It was probably nothing. Maybe just another local taking a late-night walk. But no matter how I tried to rationalize it, that was still an unsettling sight. I kept running. A few minutes later, though, that feeling of being watched returned. Stronger this time. My heart pounded harder, not from exertion, but something else. A thick, unbearable curiosity swelled in my chest, and I turned around again. He was closer, still not moving. Still just standing there. A deep, crawling unease settled in my stomach. I picked up the pace, yanking out my single earbud. My feet pounded against the wood, my breath coming quicker, but every few moments, I heard something else. Footsteps, in sync with mine. I turned again. He was even closer, but still, he wasn't moving. How was he closing the distance without taking a single step? Panic seized me. My jog turned into a sprint. The boardwalk, once a place of peace, now felt like a trap. An endless stretch of weathered planks that seemed to go on forever in both directions. My car was parked at the very end, right by the beach entrance. If I could just make it there. I ran harder than I ever had before. My lungs burned, my legs screamed, but I refused to stop. Every few seconds, I turned my head just enough to check. And every time, he was closer, still standing, still watching. I didn't understand how he was able to stop so suddenly every time I turned around. I wasn't even looking where I was going anymore, just focused on getting away. Then, finally, I saw it. The boardwalk exit. And my car. Relief surged through me, hot and overwhelming. My hands fumbled for my keys, shaking so badly I could barely press the unlock button. The car's lights flashed. I yanked the door open, threw myself inside, and slammed it shut. My breathing was ragged. My pulse thundered in my ears. I turned the key in the ignition, threw the car into reverse, and backed out of the spot. Then, as I shifted into drive and whipped the wheel to the left, I saw him, standing directly in front of my car, right where my car had been parked just seconds ago. I barely got a glimpse of him, just a flash. His hood was up, concealing most of his face. I didn't wait. I cranked the wheel hard, tires screeching against the pavement as I sped out of there. I didn't care if I ran a red light. I didn't care if I swerved too hard or nearly spun out. I just drove, and I didn't look back. When I got home, I locked every door, every window, every possible entrance. I didn't sleep that night. I still have nightmares. In them, that man is always there, watching me, chasing me. I never saw his face that night, so my mind has created its own versions of what he might have looked like. And in every single dream, those images are horrifying. I haven't gone for a winter run on the boardwalk since. Last summer, I was 22, spending a weekend at the shore with a bunch of friends in the cheapest Airbnb we could find. It was the last night of our stay. We'd been out on the beach all evening, huddled around a bonfire, just drinking, talking, nothing crazy. By the time we started packing up, most of my friends were ready to call it a night. I wasn't. I figured I'd walk off the buzz before heading back to the Airbnb. There's something weirdly peaceful about a boardwalk at night. The tourists are gone, the shops are closed, and the whole place feels frozen in time. I hadn't spent much time at the beach before, so I found myself wandering around, taking it all in. That's when I realized I really had to pee. Now, I'm not the kind of guy who can just go anywhere. My friends always made fun of me for it, but I just couldn't do it. So this was a bit of a problem. I spotted one of those public boardwalk bathrooms. Old, rundown, barely lit. Not ideal, but I didn't feel like holding it all the way back. I pushed the door open and immediately regretted it. The smell hit me first. A mix of bleach and something worse, like whatever they tried to clean up was still lingering. I decided to make it quick. I went to the farthest stall, shut the door, and just as I was finishing up, the bathroom door creaked open. I winced. Great, no more privacy. But then, something felt off. The footsteps weren't heading to a stall. They weren't approaching the urinals either. They were just circling the bathroom. Slow, deliberate. At times, I thought I could hear footsteps from multiple directions, like there was more than one person in there. But I wasn't sure. Then, they stopped, right by the sinks. No movement, no coughing, no water running, just silence. A sick feeling settled in my stomach. I hurried up, eager to get the hell out of there. But when I went to push the stall door open, it wouldn't budge. I frowned, jiggling the latch. Still stuck. Panic crept in. I shoved my shoulder against the door. Nothing. That's when the footsteps started again. Closer this time. I swear to God, it felt like someone was holding the door shut. My pulses skyrocketed. I slammed against the door, harder this time. Still nothing. That's when the adrenaline hit me full force, and my brain connected the dots. I wasn't alone in here. And whoever was out there, they didn't want me to leave. I wasn't going to sit there like some helpless target. I braced myself, charged at the door, and this time it gave way. I stumbled out, nearly falling, just in time to see the main bathroom door swinging shut, like someone had just walked out. I spun around, scanning the room. The place was empty. The person who had been in there, walking around, standing near the sinks, they were gone. I felt sick. My hands were shaking as I washed them, barely able to function. I needed to get out of there. I grabbed the handle of the bathroom door, and it wouldn't turn. The door was locked. From the outside, I froze. My mind raced. Was this a prank? A joke? Maybe one of my friends screwing with me. But that didn't make sense. They had all gone back. None of them had even seen me walk toward this bathroom. Plus, this wasn't the kind of thing any of them would do. Something wasn't right. I banged on the door hard. I yelled for whoever was out there to open up. No response. And then, a noise behind me. A soft creak. I whipped around. One of the stall doors had shifted. I couldn't see anything, but I knew someone was in there, which meant there had been two people in that bathroom the whole time. A wave of dread crashed over me. I glanced down. No feet visible under the stall doors. Whoever was in there, they were standing on the toilet. A twisted image filled my head. Someone hunched on top of the seat, motionless, waiting. I had to get out. I spotted a grimy, rectangular window near the ceiling. Small, barely big enough to squeeze through, but it was my only way out. I climbed onto the sink beneath it, fully expecting the damn thing to collapse under my weight. The second I shoved the window open, one of the stall doors burst open. I twisted my head just in time to lock eyes with the man inside. He was wrong. His skin was pale, deathly pale, and he was hairy, wild, unkempt, wiry hair covering his arms and neck. He was dressed like a teenager, but this guy had to be at least 50. Something about his expression made my stomach turn. I didn't waste another second. I scrambled through the window, half falling, half throwing myself out onto the boardwalk. My knee hit the ground hard. Didn't care. I ran. I didn't stop until I was far away. When I felt safe enough, I called the cops. They showed up fast. It was a beach town after all. But by the time they checked the bathroom, he was gone. That part of the boardwalk was practically dead. No cameras, no open shops, nothing. One of the officers inspected the bathroom door and pointed out deep scratches on the handle, like someone had tampered with it. We all agreed, whoever it was, they hadn't wanted me to leave. The officers told me I was smart to escape through the window. And that was that. I left the beach the next day. Never got an update. Never found out who he was or what he wanted. I'm sorry in advance if I mess up some details, but this happened when I was really young. I don't remember exactly how old I was, maybe 8 or 9, but I know it was during one of those summers my family spent at my grandparents' beach house. It was kind of the family hub. Every summer, a bunch of us, siblings, cousins, aunts, uncles, would pile in for weekends or weeks at a time. The house wasn't anything fancy, but it had a ridiculous number of bedrooms and could fit the entire family easily. It sat close to the shore, so I spent whole days playing in the sand and riding my bike through the quiet, sun-bleached streets of Silver Bay. Every summer there was like an extended fever dream, a blur of salt air and long, endless afternoons. But that summer was different. There was a big hurricane in the forecast, one that had the whole town scrambling for months in advance. I don't know if other beach towns did this, but ours built massive sand dunes along the shore as a makeshift barrier. Calling them dunes doesn't quite do them justice. They were enormous. To a kid, they looked like castle walls. I bet from an aerial view, the coastline must have looked surreal, like something out of a post-apocalyptic movie. That summer, my siblings and I spent hours climbing the dunes, tumbling down the other side, pretending we were storming a fortress. But something about them always felt a little wrong. Usually, when you stood on the boardwalk, you could see the ocean stretching endlessly ahead. But with those dunes in the way, it was like the beach had been erased. Instead of the water, there was just a towering, lifeless wall of sand. The town had also enforced strict beach hours. Once the lifeguards were off duty, no one was technically allowed on the sand. Not that it stopped us locals. Silver Bay was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, and letting kids roam wasn't considered a big deal. As long as we promised not to go into the ocean, our parents didn't mind. And I had a bit of a rebellious streak back then. That's what led me to sneak out that evening. It wasn't dark yet. The sun hadn't even started to set. But I hadn't asked permission. I just wanted some space. I think I had gotten into a fight with my brother, but I don't really remember. The sliding door downstairs, where all the kids' rooms were, made sneaking out ridiculously easy. My older cousins had practically written the playbook on it, usually for way more rebellious reasons than a solo beach walk. Even now, we still laugh about how easy it was to slip in and out without the adults noticing. Anyway, as quietly as I could, I stepped outside, my bare feet pressing into the warm wood of the deck. I didn't even bother putting on shoes. I made my way toward the boardwalk, half expecting to run into some locals, maybe even a few kids my age. There were always people around, even after beach hours. But that night, the town felt empty. Not just quiet, deserted. The boardwalk stretched out in both directions, eerily still. No sounds of distant laughter, no late-night joggers, not even the faint hum of a passing car. Just the wind moving through the dunes, carrying the scent of salt and something else, something stale. I was about to turn back when I saw it. A thin ribbon of smoke rising from beyond one of the dunes. At first, I thought it was just fog rolling in, but no, this was smoke. Dark, curling tendrils, the kind you'd see from a fire. Now smoke on the beach wasn't totally unheard of. People lit bonfires all the time, even though it was technically against the rules. But something about this felt wrong. There was no one around. No voices, no music, no crackling firewood. Just a silent column of smoke bleeding into the sky like the aftermath of something smoldering, something burnt. I looked around for an adult. Nothing. Just the empty boardwalk and the towering dunes. I should have gone home, but I didn't. Curiosity got the better of me, and besides, my parents had always taught me to help if I saw someone in trouble, and that's what this felt like, someone in trouble. I climbed the dune, angling myself away from the smoke, just in case. The sand was cool under my hands as I scrambled upward, my breath coming in short, nervous bursts. By the time I reached the top, my legs were shaking, my skin dusted in a fine layer of grit. And that's when I saw it. I looked down the other side of the dune, expecting to see what I thought would be there, a bonfire. And sure enough, there it was. But something was wrong. The fire was completely isolated. There were no people, no chairs, no coolers, no footprints in the sand. Just a fire burning in the middle of an empty beach, as if whoever had started it had just vanished. Even at that age, I knew leaving a fire unattended like that was dangerous. It felt wrong, really wrong. I slid down the dune, the sand shifting under my bare feet, and made my way over to it. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at the flames licking hungrily at the air. There was no wind, but the fire moved strangely, almost like it was alive. I didn't know what else to do, so I started kicking sand onto it, over and over, until the flames flickered and died, suffocated under the weight of the cooling sand. The beach was silent again, but I wasn't ready to leave. My curiosity had taken hold. Who would start a fire just to abandon it? The only explanations I could think of were bad ones. Someone trying to cover up something. Someone trying to get rid of evidence. I crouched down, using a stick to poke through the remnants of the fire pit. That's when I found them. Clothes. Little kids' clothes. Socks. A pair of tiny shoes. Half-burned fabric, like pajamas or something. A sick feeling twisted in my stomach. My breath caught in my throat. Why were there kids' clothes in the fire? Then I saw something else. Buried beneath the charred remains were photographs, or at least, what was left of them. Most were burned beyond recognition, curled and blackened by the heat, but one had survived just enough for me to make out a face. A boy. He looked about my age. And the worst part? He looked like me. Not identical, but close enough that if someone had told me he was a long-lost cousin or something, I wouldn't have questioned it. A cold, primal fear surged through me. My body screamed at me to run. I dropped the stick, my hands shaking. My skin felt too tight, my chest too small to hold my breath. And then I heard it. A voice. Hey. Sharp, slurred, cutting through the heavy silence. I snapped my head up. A man was coming toward me from down the beach. He was bald, his silhouette unsteady against the darkening sky. Even from a distance, I could see something wrong about the way he moved, stumbling every few steps, like he was fighting to stay upright. Drunk, or something worse. His voice came again, louder this time. Hey, kid. I couldn't move. I was frozen, my body locked in place by pure, unfiltered terror. Then he sped up. His steps grew quicker, more purposeful. His movements still clumsy, but his intent clear. Don't you go anywhere. That snapped me out of it. My little brain finally caught up to my body. and I turned and ran. The sand made it nearly impossible. Every step felt like dragging myself through quicksand, but adrenaline pushed me forward. I could hear him behind me, shouting, his voice growing angrier. He was getting closer. I reached the dune and scrambled up, clawing at the shifting sand, my fingers digging deep as I tried to pull myself to the top. And then I felt him. Fingernails scraping against my ankle, a hand grasping, just missing. By some miracle, he never got a solid grip. I kicked frantically, wrenching myself free, and vaulted over the top of the dune, tumbling down the other side. I landed hard but didn't stop. I sprinted toward the boardwalk, my breath burning in my chest, my legs threatening to give out beneath me. I didn't look back, not at first, but when I reached the wooden planks, I risked a glance. He wasn't there. No movement, no footsteps following me, no sign of him at all. But I didn't stop running. I ran all the way home. When I finally burst into my room, I collapsed onto my bed, shaking. My whole body felt like it was buzzing, my skin prickling with the lingering touch of those fingers on my ankle. I wanted to tell my parents. I really did. But all I could think about was how I'd snuck out, how much trouble I'd be in if they found out. So I kept my mouth shut. Looking back, I know that was a mistake. I should have said something, told someone, at least asked if anyone else had seen anything strange that night. But I didn't, and nothing ever came of it. No news reports, no cops at the beach the next day, no missing kids in the area, just silence. But even after all these years, I can't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. And the thing that still haunts me the most, that boy in the photograph, the one who looked just like me. Sorry to interrupt. If you're enjoying the story, let me know in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. My son George has always had the strangest friends. I don't know why, but ever since he was little, he's always attracted what you might call the weird kids. I have plenty of stories, but one, in particular, sticks out like a thorn. George was in the 4th grade when we moved to Silver Springs, a small town in Oregon, because of my husband's job reassignment. George had always been outgoing and friendly, so my husband and I weren't too worried about him making new friends. We were settling in well as a family, and he seemed to be adjusting to school just fine. I was relieved when I finally met the parents of his classmates. They all seemed like good, decent people, friendly, involved, the kind of neighbors you trust. A few months after the move, I received a call from the school in the middle of the day. The principal requested that one of us come in to discuss an incident involving George and another student. My husband was at work, so I went. I remember feeling a mix of anger and confusion. Anger because I assumed my son had been in a fight, which would mean a stern punishment if he was at fault. But mostly confusion. Physical altercations were completely out of character for George. He was a sweet, mild-mannered kid, always talkative, always eager to please. Something about the whole thing didn't sit right with me. When I picked him up, he was eerily quiet. Usually, he was an oversharer, chattering on about his day. But that afternoon, he refused to answer any of my questions. That silence made my stomach knot. Was he embarrassed? Scared? When we arrived at the principal's office, he was asked to wait outside. I sat across from the principal, who began asking the usual questions. How is George at home? Is he respectful? Does he talk back? I answered honestly. He was a great kid, well-behaved, polite. That's not just a mother's bias. It was the truth. Then the principal explained why I was there. Apparently, George had gotten into a fight with a classmate named Sebastian after recess. I felt a lump form in my throat. The principal told me that George and Sebastian had been the last 2 kids left outside. As they were walking up the stairs together, George suddenly pulled an eraser out of his pocket and hit Sebastian over the head with it. Sebastian fell, screaming. I was stunned. It made no sense. George wasn't a violent child, and what's more, he and Sebastian were friends. He'd spoken fondly of him before. No one had witnessed the incident, but both boys confirmed the same basic details. The principal assured me that George wasn't in serious trouble. Kids scuffle sometimes, and no real harm had been done. He just wanted me to be aware. I was somewhat relieved, but something still felt off. George remained silent on the drive home. He didn't open up until right before bedtime. I had grown frustrated with his refusal to talk, but when he finally spoke, his words chilled me. Sebastian tricked me. I sat up straighter. What do you mean? He hesitated, then explained. They had been playing make-believe Street Fighter, something Sebastian had come up with. He told George to use an eraser for a knockout move. So George did, but as soon as the eraser touched Sebastian's head, Sebastian collapsed, screaming, convulsing, and then, in a low whisper, he had hissed into George's ear. Tell them you attacked me, or I'll make you sorry. I felt my skin prickle. George had done exactly as he was told. The teachers had assumed it was a fight. I was furious. My child had been manipulated and falsely accused. Instead of going to the school, I decided to handle it myself. That night, I found Sebastian's mother's number in the school directory and gave her a call. She introduced herself as Maggie. She sounded sweet, genuine, the kind of person you immediately trust. She told me she already knew what had happened and had reprimanded Sebastian for it. That stopped me. He told her the truth, just like that. She continued, saying that Sebastian had always had behavioral problems. Sometimes he would think and act like another person entirely. I felt my anger soften. It sounded like he had real issues, something he wasn't entirely in control of. Then Maggie suggested something unexpected. Maybe the boys should have a sleepover, get to know each other better, start fresh. I hesitated, but she sounded so sincere, and George seemed back to his normal self. I agreed. That weekend, I drove George over to Maggie's house. It was a beautiful two-story Victorian, the kind that looks cozy in the daylight but strangely eerie after dark. Maggie welcomed us in with a warm smile. She and I shared a bottle of wine in the kitchen while the boys played in the basement. She was charming, kind, down to earth. I had no idea that night would change everything. Maggie and I had such a great time talking that I ended up staying for hours. The wine flowed, the conversation was easy, and before I knew it, the evening had slipped away. But as much as I enjoyed her company, something had been nagging at me since our last conversation. So, after hesitating for a moment, I finally asked, Maggie, can I ask you something? About Sebastian? Her entire demeanor shifted. Her bright, welcoming expression dimmed, and her voice dropped to a lower, more hushed tone. She told me that Sebastian had always had trouble making friends. He had seen several doctors, all of whom assured her that he would likely outgrow his strange behavior in time. He's gotten a lot better, she insisted. The fact that he's even socializing at school is a great sign. I didn't press her further. All I really wanted was reassurance that my son would be safe that night. Maggie promised me Sebastian had never been violent, just odd. That was good enough for me. Maggie was clearly a loving mother, and truthfully, I liked the idea of George helping Sebastian learn how to navigate friendships. As the evening wound down, I went to the basement to say goodbye to George. The boys were laughing and playing Battleship, completely at ease. Seeing them like that made me feel better. I kissed George on the head, told him to be good, and drove home. The next morning, when I arrived to pick George up, he was already waiting by the door with his bag slung over his shoulder and a forced smile on his face. Hey, buddy, had fun? I asked as I packed his things into the car. He nodded quickly, but something about his expression was off. It wasn't until we were halfway home that he suddenly burst into tears. Panic surged through me. George, what's wrong? He was shaking. His small hands gripped his seatbelt so tightly his knuckles turned white. Mom. His voice was barely above a whisper. Something really bad happened last night. I felt my stomach drop. What do you mean? His voice trembled as he told me everything. The night in the basement. Everything had been fine at first. The boys had set up their air mattresses side by side in the basement and talked until they got sleepy. At some point in the night, George woke up. He wasn't sure why at first. Then he heard something. A whispering voice. It was coming from the bathroom. The door was slightly ajar, and a strange, flickering light danced inside. It wasn't the overhead light. It was warmer, dimmer, like candlelight. At first, George thought Sebastian was just talking on the phone, but as he listened closer, the whispers didn't make sense. Sebastian was talking, but not to anyone, and he wasn't calling himself Sebastian. He kept saying Mr. Jim. Mr. Jim is here now. Mr. Jim is listening. George felt frozen in place. It was like Sebastian had become someone else entirely. And then, the candle went out. The room was pitch dark. George squeezed his eyes shut, pretending to be asleep. His heart pounded in his ears. A long silence stretched between them. Then he heard it. The slow creak of the bathroom door opening. A few seconds later, the whispering started again. This time, it was right above him. It went on for what felt like forever. The words didn't even sound like English. They were soft, breathy, unnatural. George was too scared to move. He just lay there, eyes shut, hardly daring to breathe. Eventually, Sebastian stopped and crawled back into bed like nothing had happened. In the morning, he was completely normal again. George was too afraid to ask him about it. Confronting Maggie, I was horrified. Something deep in my gut told me this wasn't just childhood imagination. Something was wrong. The moment I got home, I called Maggie. At first, she laughed it off. Oh, Sebastian's always been a creative kid. But when I pressed her, her voice faltered. Then she admitted the truth. Sebastian's behavioral problems were far worse than she had let on. A psychiatrist had even suggested that he showed signs of multiple personality disorder. They had already moved twice before because Sebastian had been expelled from his previous schools. I was stunned, and then furious. Why the hell didn't you tell me this before? I snapped. Why would you put my son in danger like that? Maggie's response was unexpected. She begged me not to say anything to the school. Please, she whispered. If they find out, we'll have to move again. I didn't know what to say. A part of me wanted to respect her privacy, but another part of me knew something was deeply, deeply wrong. I blurted out, okay, and hung up before she could respond. I told myself I'd make a decision by the end of the week, but I never got the chance. Sebastian disappears. That Monday, Sebastian attacked another student at recess. It was serious enough that the school sent out a statement to all the parents, though they kept the details vague. By the end of the day, I found out that Sebastian had been expelled. I called Maggie's number, disconnected. I tried again, same result. A day later, I drove to their house. It was completely empty. No moving trucks. No signs of a rushed departure. They were just gone. I scoured the internet looking for any trace of them. There was nothing. No forwarding address. No mention of them anywhere. It was like they had never existed at all. That was years ago. George doesn't talk about it anymore. In fact, I think he's forgotten about it entirely. But I haven't. I still wonder what could have happened that night in that basement. What George might have seen if he had opened his eyes. And worst of all, what kind of things Sebastian, or Mr. Jim, is doing now. My upbringing was unorthodox. I grew up in a Southern Baptist household, the kind where ghosts didn't exist. But demons? Oh, we were absolutely certain about those. Let me explain. If something strange happened, it wasn't a spirit or a lost soul. It was something darker, something biblical. I never fully bought into it, but the message was drilled into me from a young age. Rejecting demons meant rejecting Scripture itself. My mother, though, she was different. Faith was optional for her. She wasn't an atheist or agnostic, just indifferent. She'd say things like, "God and I have an understanding," whenever I asked why we didn't go to church more often. While I clung to religion for structure and stability, she drifted further away from it. It was one of many things that widened the gap between us. I won't sugarcoat it. My mother struggled. Addiction, mental health issues, things she never wanted help for. Some days she was functional. Other days, she was someone else entirely. Looking back, I think she had schizophrenia or something close to it. But before you judge my family for not getting her help, understand, it was a different time back then. The nightmare. One afternoon, I had a nightmare so vivid, I still remember every detail. In the dream, I was lying in bed when my mother stormed into my room, screaming. Her face was twisted in fury as she grabbed my wrist and shook me violently. I woke up drenched in sweat, my whole body locked in fear. But before I could shake off the dream, it happened again. Except this time, I wasn't asleep. The door slammed open, and there she was. Same expression, same unhinged rage, same words. It was like the dream had been some kind of warning. I barely managed to push her off, screaming for her to stop. And then, it was over. She left as suddenly as she had entered. The next morning, when I confronted her, she had no memory of it. She looked confused, even a little hurt. I told myself it was a coincidence, a weird overlap between my subconscious and her moods. But part of me wondered if it was something worse. A few weeks later, I heard her screaming from the backyard. It wasn't panic. It wasn't distress. It was excitement. I ran outside and froze. My mother stood in the yard, grinning, holding a massive 7-foot-long snake in her bare hands. That alone was terrifying, but there's something you need to know. My mother had a lifelong phobia of snakes. She couldn't even look at them on TV without recoiling in horror. And yet, there she was, gripping one like it was a toy. She turned to me, eyes wild. "Come here," she said, motioning for me to take it. I took a step back, shaking my head. "Mom, what the hell?" She didn't even seem to understand me. She just smiled wider, tilting her head at an unnatural angle, like she was trying to scare me on purpose. I couldn't deal with it. I turned and ran back inside, slamming the door behind me. My heart pounded. I peeped out the window. She was still standing there, still smiling, holding the snake like an offering. Eventually, she let it slither to the ground and walked back inside as if nothing had happened. Later, when I asked her about it, she shrugged, like I'd made it up. She said, "You must have had a strange dream." And that was it. The church incident. That winter, my church held an overnight lock-in. I was relieved to go. Church was my escape, a place where I could be around predictable, normal people. My mother dropped me off, completely sober. She even kissed my forehead before driving away. At around 4:30 a.m., just as we were settling in to sleep, a loud knocking echoed through the chapel. We all sat up, glancing at each other. Then, the knocking moved. It traveled around the building in an impossible way. At times it sounded like it was coming from multiple directions at once. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't an animal. It was rhythmic, circling the chapel, like someone, or something, was trying to break in. The pastor, the only one with a key, was asleep in his office. He hadn't heard a thing. I ran to wake him. And the moment he stepped into the chapel, the knocking stopped. He opened the front doors and stumbled back in fear. Standing there, barefoot in the freezing air, was my mother. Her clothes were disheveled, her hair dripping with sweat. Her lips were moving, but I couldn't hear what she was saying. She didn't acknowledge the pastor. Her eyes locked on me immediately. A slow, unsettling smile stretched across her face, and she walked forward. I wanted to run. The pastor gripped my arm. "Stay here." But I felt powerless, like I had no choice. I climbed into the car, afraid she was going to snap. But she didn't. The drive home was silent. She didn't speak, didn't explain. When I asked why she was there, nothing. When we got home, she stopped in the doorway and just stared at me. She didn't move, didn't blink, just watched me as I walked to my room. I locked the door and lay awake for hours, listening. The morning after, in the morning, she was in the kitchen, cooking breakfast, cheerful, like nothing had happened. She jumped when she saw me. I was just about to pick you up from the church. I felt the blood drain from my face. She had no memory of knocking on the chapel doors, no memory of driving me home. I expected someone, the pastor, an elder, anyone, to say something, but no one did. It was like they didn't know how to process it. Or worse, they didn't want to. The haunting memory, that was decades ago. She's gone now. But her memory, it will never leave me, for better or for worse. I don't know if I believe in demons anymore, or the supernatural, but I can't explain what happened. The logical explanation is mental illness, maybe addiction, maybe withdrawal, or maybe something else. But the memory lapses, the eerie timing, the way she acted like a different person. Some nights, it still haunts me. I tell myself there's a rational answer. I tell myself I don't believe. But even now, I'm not sure I believe that. His brother had years before, his weight shifting slightly, his body unnervingly still except for that subtle, rhythmic motion. At first, I told myself it was just déjà vu. Kids mimic older siblings all the time, even in their subconscious states. But deep down, something felt wrong. The first real warning sign came one night when I woke up to the sound of tapping. That same slow, deliberate rhythm. My stomach tightened as I realized it was coming from the hallway. I already knew what I would see before I even got out of bed. Sure enough, my younger son stood there, forehead pressed gently against the wall, knocking in that measured, unsettling way. His fingertips ghosted over the surface, tracing something invisible, his entire posture eerily identical to his brother's years before. A cold dread settled over me. This wasn't just some strange quirk of childhood sleepwalking. This was something else, something repeating. I whispered his name, but he didn't respond. His breath was slow, steady, too steady. My instincts screamed at me to grab him, to wake him up, to do anything to break the moment. But I hesitated. That same gut-deep fear held me in place, the same one I had felt years earlier. When I finally reached for him, placing a light hand on his shoulder, his reaction sent ice through my veins. His body tensed. He didn't blink or stir like his brother had. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, as if listening, like something had spoken to him through the wall. And then, in a voice that wasn't quite his own, he muttered something under his breath. The words were garbled, slurred, just like his brother's had been, but this time I caught a few of them. Not yet. Not ready. My heart pounded. I shook him harder. His breath hitched, and finally he blinked, dazed and confused. Without a word, he let me guide him back to bed. I didn't sleep that night. In the morning, I asked him about it. He just looked at me, rubbing his eyes. "What are you talking about?" he said, yawning. "I didn't get up last night." I wanted to believe him. I really did, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been waiting. And worse, whatever it was patient. The way my younger son moved, the slow, eerie rhythm, was exactly like his older brother had years ago. It wasn't random, not in the way most sleepwalking is. It felt deliberate, methodical, like I was trapped in a memory I shouldn't have been reliving. But then it got worse. One night, I woke up to the tapping again. I didn't need to step into the hallway to know what I'd find. My stomach clenched as I swung my legs over the side of the bed. The steady, rhythmic knocking filled the silence of the house, the sound almost patient. I already knew where he would be standing before I even saw him. And I was right. There he was, his forehead pressed against the exact same spot on the wall, knocking gently in that slow, measured way. His fingers brushed the surface like he was feeling for something unseen. It was identical to how his brother had moved all those years ago. My skin crawled. I called his name. Nothing. I touched his shoulder. Nothing. He just kept tapping, his small frame swaying slightly as if caught in some deep, unreachable place. And then the realization hit me. He had never seen his older brother sleepwalk. As far as I knew, he had never even heard about it. His brother had outgrown the habit long before he was old enough to remember. And yet, here he was, exhibiting the exact same behaviors. Not just the wandering, not just the staring, but the tapping, the brushing of fingertips, the eerie, misplaced urgency of it all. My stomach twisted. I finally snapped him out of it, guiding him back to bed, whispering reassurances I wasn't sure I believed myself. And just like his brother, the sleepwalking eventually stopped. No more tapping. No more vacant hallway stares. He had no recollection of it in the morning. For years, I didn't think about it. In all honesty, I forgot about the whole thing. But there's a reason I'm writing this now. With both of my sons off at college, the house was quieter than it had ever been. My husband and I found ourselves looking for ways to fill the silence, to keep busy. A few weeks ago, we finally decided to renovate. New floors, fresh paint, some minor updates to make the place feel new again. It was while stripping the old wallpaper that we found it. At first, I thought it was just some odd discoloration beneath the paper. Maybe a stain or old backing from previous renovations. But as we peeled more away, my breath caught in my throat. It was a mirror. An old antique-style mirror, seamlessly embedded into the wall. Someone had gone through the trouble of covering it instead of removing it. I stood there frozen, my pulse hammering in my ears. The logical part of me wanted to brush it off. Maybe it was just a decorative piece from a different era, forgotten and sealed away. But deep down, I felt it. We weren't supposed to find it. And then the realization hit me like ice water down my spine. This was the exact spot. The very place where both of my sons had stood, pressing their foreheads against the wall in the dead of night. The very place they had been trying to step into. There was no way they could have known it was there. The mirror had been completely hidden beneath layers of wallpaper for decades. And yet, somehow, both of them had felt it, had been drawn to it. I got rid of the mirror immediately. I don't care how ridiculous it sounds. I took no chances. But even now, I can't shake the feeling that we weren't supposed to remove it. That maybe we disturbed something. Something that had been waiting all along. Brace yourself. What I'm about to share with you is pure terror. I don't even know if this is the right place to tell my story, but I have to get it out there. I've told everyone, my family, my friends, even some news outlets, but it never feels like enough. It's like some deep, gut-wrenching instinct is forcing me to warn as many people as possible about what's been happening to me. So here goes. It's November 2019 as I write this, but the story itself goes way back. 7 years, maybe more. I can't pinpoint the exact year off the top of my head, but let's say 2012, maybe 2013. At the time, I was in my mid-20s, working a stable job, and dating my girlfriend, now my fiancée. I never went to college, so I'd been in the workforce for years, and my life wasn't really set up for drastic changes. There was no reason for me to move far away from home, so I didn't. By then, my girlfriend and I had just moved into the house I grew up in, an old brick colonial that my parents had passed down to me as my first home. The house had been in our family for generations, originally built by my grandfather, who left it to my dad when he turned 40. The place had seen its share of renovations, but you could still tell it was old. The red brick gave it away. There weren't many houses like it in our area, so it stood out. I kind of liked that, though. It made the place feel unique. We lived in a small wooded town in upstate Maine, where the houses were spaced far apart. Ours was at the very end of a long, winding road bordering the forest on two sides. And let me tell you, that forest was massive. Miles and miles of uncharted wilderness. As kids, my brothers and I would spend entire days exploring it, and no matter how far we wandered, we never seemed to reach the other side. Some people might find that unsettling, but I always loved the woods. I liked my solitude. I liked being in my own little corner of the world, far from anyone else. It felt safe. Until it didn't. The first footprints. A few months after moving in, things started happening. It was winter, snow on the ground, air sharp and freezing. It must have been a Sunday because that was the only day I got to sleep in. I remember waking up late, throwing on a jacket, and heading outside to grab coffee, something I did every Sunday morning without fail. And that's when I saw them. Footprints. A single trail of footprints in the snow, leading from the woods directly to my pickup truck. Not to the house, not to the front door, just to the driver's side door of my truck. Then they turned around and led straight back into the trees. At first, I thought my girlfriend had come outside for some reason, but that didn't make sense. The footprints weren't hers. They hadn't come from the house at all. They came from the woods. I stood there, staring at them, trying to piece together some kind of logical explanation, but there wasn't one. Someone had walked out of the trees up to my truck and then straight back into the woods, without leaving any sign of stopping, lingering, or approaching the house. It was weird. I asked my girlfriend about it later, but of course, she had no idea what I was talking about. At the time, I brushed it off. Maybe some hunter had gotten lost. Maybe it was just some dumb kid playing a prank. I wanted to believe that. But it wasn't a prank. Something was watching. The next incident happened 2 winters later, 2015. I remember the exact year because it was the same winter my Seahawks lost the Super Bowl to Tom Brady. That morning, I stepped outside, heading to my truck again. The moment my foot hit the driveway, I froze. Footprints. Everywhere. Not just a single trail this time. Dozens of them. The entire yard was covered in footprints, circling the house, standing near the windows, tracking along the porch. Someone had been all over our property. I'm a level-headed guy. I don't jump to conclusions. I don't freak out over weird noises or strange shadows. But this made my stomach drop. I was already late for work, but I couldn't just leave my girlfriend alone in the house without checking things out. I did a quick lap around the property, looking for any sign of movement. Nothing. No one was there. I snapped a few pictures on my phone and texted my girlfriend immediately. Told her to keep the doors locked, not to open the door for anyone, and to call me if she heard anything weird. But even as I drove off to work, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Really, really wrong. The fear sets in. I barely made it through the workday. The whole morning, I had this creeping, gnawing sensation in my gut, like I was being watched. By noon, I couldn't take it anymore. I told my boss I had a family emergency and left early. I had to go home. I had to figure out who or what was walking around my house in the middle of the night, and I had no idea just how bad things were about to get. I pulled into the driveway, still unsettled from what I'd seen that morning. I needed answers. My fiancée was already outside, waving me over as soon as I stepped out of the truck. Her face was pale. She looked shaken. I barely had time to ask what was wrong before she pointed at one of the footprints near the porch. "It's been bothering me all day," she said. I looked closer. That's when I realized what she meant. There were no shoe prints. Bare feet. Someone had been walking around our house in the middle of winter, barefoot. I felt like an idiot for not noticing sooner. The detail was so obvious, so wrong, that my stomach clenched just looking at the tracks. Who the hell would walk around barefoot in the freezing cold? My fiancée tried to offer an explanation. Maybe it was some kind of animal? But she didn't sound convinced, and neither was I. The footprints weren't distorted or stretched. They weren't paws or anything that resembled an animal. They were human. We went inside and called my dad. He'd grown up in this house, spent his entire childhood in these woods. Maybe he'd seen something like this before, but he hadn't. He swore up and down that, in all the years he lived here, nothing like this had ever happened. "I don't know what to tell you, son," he said. "If it were me, I'd grab my rifle and go find whoever's doing this." I didn't want to do that, not alone, but I also knew it was my responsibility to protect our home. My fiancée wanted to call the police, but I convinced her it would be a waste of time. What would I even say? That someone walked around our yard barefoot. That wasn't illegal, and unless I found whoever was out there, trespassing wouldn't be enough to get the cops to take it seriously. I promised her that if I found anything, we'd call the police right away. Then I loaded my rifle, threw on my coat, and stepped into the woods. The trail splits. The footprints led deep into the trees. I followed them for 30 minutes. The cold wind howled through the branches, and the deeper I went, the darker it got. My boots crunched against the frost-covered ground, the sound sharp in the eerie silence. Then I saw it. The trail split. A single set of footprints had suddenly turned into two separate trails, veering off in different directions. I stopped, gripping my rifle tight. My breath hung in the air. What the hell? For the past half hour, I've been following a single person. Now, there were two. At first, I thought maybe they had doubled back, trying to throw me off. But then a worse thought hit me. Was I ever tracking just one person? Had there been two of them this whole time? I turned in a slow circle, scanning the trees. Suddenly, the woods didn't feel so empty anymore. For the first time since this started, I felt real fear creeping into my chest. I was alone. I was outnumbered, and I was being watched. I stood there for what felt like forever, debating what to do. Then, I made my choice. I turned around and walked back home. The nightmare returns. That night, we called the police. As expected, they told us there was nothing they could do. Without any evidence of a crime, they weren't going to launch an investigation over some footprints in the snow. I told my fiancée I'd try again in the morning, but overnight, a storm rolled in. By the time I woke up, the fresh snow had erased everything. No footprints, no trail to follow, nothing. She was terrified, and honestly, so was I, but there was nothing we could do. Luckily, nothing else happened that winter. In fact, years passed without incident. I almost forgot about it. My fiancée and I got engaged. We focused on the future. We moved on. But the nightmare wasn't over, because less than a year ago, it started again. They took something. It was January of this year, the middle of winter. I woke up one morning, looked outside, and saw footprints. Everywhere. Just like before, they circled the house. Just like before, they stopped at the windows. But this time, it was worse, because this time, they had gone to my shed. I ran outside, threw open the doors, and found half my tools missing. I don't know what else they did while they were on my property. I don't know how long they had been watching us. But this was different. They had taken something. My fiancée was hysterical. She broke down crying in the bedroom, asking if we'd ever be free of this. I didn't have an answer, but I was done waiting. The hunt begins. I called my friend Theo, explained the situation, and asked if he'd help me. Theo is ex-military. He's a survivalist, a tracker. He knows the woods better than anyone I've ever met. He also owns some serious gear, an AR-10 rifle with a thermal scope, perfect for spotting movement even in complete darkness. When I told him what was going on, he didn't hesitate. "I'll be there in an hour." My fiancée was worried sick, but I reassured her. Theo and I would handle this. We dressed for the cold, loaded up our gear, and prepared to head into the woods. This time, I wasn't going in alone. We left the house just before noon, moving deeper into the woods with every step. At first, Theo and I talked as we walked, but after about 45 minutes, the conversation died off. It was like the weight of the situation had suddenly hit us both at the same time. We weren't just hunting some trespasser. We were tracking something that had been watching my house for years. Something that had been inside my yard. Something that took my tools, but left no footprints leading away. I remember silently praying that I hadn't just dragged Theo into something we weren't ready for. I don't know how long we walked after that, but eventually we ran into the same problem as before. The tracks split. Again. Theo and I exchanged a look. We both understood what that meant. Whoever had left these tracks didn't want to be followed. We chose to follow the path on the left first, but after just a few minutes, the trail ended abruptly, as if the person had just vanished into thin air. We retraced our steps back to the split, trying the other path. Theo muttered, "This guy really doesn't want us finding him." I didn't answer. I didn't want to think about it. The footprints weren't right. We kept moving in silence, tracking the footprints as the daylight slipped away. At least 3 more times, the trail ended suddenly, forcing us to backtrack. At first, I thought maybe we were just missing something, that the wind had erased part of the trail. But no, that wasn't it. It was the way the footprints stopped, the way the ground looked untouched beyond certain points. The more I stared at them, the more disturbed I felt. Because if I hadn't known any better, I would have sworn the tracks had been made backwards, like someone had walked in reverse, carefully stepping into their own footprints. That level of precision wasn't normal. It wasn't possible. Theo must have been thinking the same thing, because after a while, he exhaled sharply and said, "Well, at least we're probably only tracking one person." I didn't find that comforting. We were being watched. Eventually, the sun started to set. By then, we were deep in the woods. I didn't recognize my surroundings at all. The footprints finally stopped splitting. "Whoever this is," Theo said, "they gave up trying to fake us out." We pressed forward for another 5 minutes. Then I noticed something strange. The footprints were getting deeper. Whoever we were tracking had stopped walking lightly. Their steps were heavy, sinking further into the snow. Theo stopped abruptly, staring down at the trail. "We're close." And then, another set of footprints appeared, right alongside the first. Theo swore under his breath. Damn it, I was wrong. We weren't following one person. We were following 2. The figures in the dark. By now, the sun was gone, and the forest was pitch black. Theo checked his scope every few seconds. "I can still see," he whispered. "We're fine." The snow gave me some visibility, but not much. Honestly, if Theo hadn't been there, I would have turned back. The darkness was too thick. Then, Theo stopped dead in his tracks. His arm shot out, pressing against my chest to stop me. I turned to him confused. He didn't say a word. He just lifted his rifle and looked through his thermal scope. He went completely still. He didn't blink, didn't breathe. I had never seen him freeze up like that before. After what felt like forever, he slowly moved to a tree and crouched behind it. I did the same. He lifted the scope again. His hands started to shake. I couldn't take it anymore. I lightly tapped his shoulder. Theo lowered the rifle. Then, without saying a word, he handed it to me. I lifted it to my eye, scanning the trees. And that's when I saw them. The things in the woods. There were 4 figures huddled in the snow. At first, I thought they were bears, but then I saw their limbs, their posture. They weren't animals. They were human, naked human beings crouched low in the snow. The 2 larger ones were hunched over something on the ground, their bodies barely moving. The 2 smaller ones were clinging to a nearby tree, their heads jerking violently in every direction. They were eating something. I couldn't see faces or details. The thermal scope didn't allow that. But I saw enough, and it was the most terrifying thing I had ever seen in my life. I fought back the urge to scream. Then, as if they could hear me, the larger figures slowly reached out, lifted the smaller ones onto their shoulders, and started walking deeper into the woods. We never spoke a word. Theo and I didn't move, not for a long time. We just stayed hidden, crouched behind that tree, making sure those things were gone. By the time we finally got back to the house, hours had passed. I was shocked to find my fiancée still awake. She rushed over as soon as we walked in. She couldn't sleep, not knowing I was out there. She asked what we found. I told her as little as possible, but it was enough. She was horrified. The police couldn't help us. We called the police that night. They said they'd search the woods in the morning. Theo agreed to stay over so we could help them. At sunrise, we guided the officers through the trail. We showed them where the footprints had led. But after a few hours, they called off the search. The snowfall had covered most of the tracks. And without a real crime, there was nothing they could do. My fiancé begged them to keep looking. They refused. I didn't blame them, but it didn't feel like closure. It's not over. Winter is approaching fast, and my fiancé and I are terrified. We're afraid that those people, or whatever they are, will come back again. We've talked about moving. We want to move, but we haven't been able to make it happen, and I don't know why. I've told everyone about this. I've asked all my neighbors. No one has ever experienced anything like this before. Why my house? Why us? Some of my friends think it's harmless. Others say I'm in grave danger. I think I'm going to try and seal off my yard from the woods. But honestly, I don't think that will stop them. Last summer, I decided to take on a major section of the Pacific Crest Trail. Hiking had always been my escape, especially solo trips. The plan was simple: park my truck at the end of the route, hitch a ride to the trailhead, and hike back over the next 10 days. Straightforward enough. The first few days were exactly what I had hoped for. Towering pines, winding dirt paths, crisp mountain air. It was just me and the wilderness, the way I liked it. I'm in decent shape, so I don't stop often while hiking, but I never push my luck when the sun goes down. Camping alone in the middle of nowhere, you need to be smart. I always set up camp away from the main trail, just far enough to stay hidden. Less chance of running into strangers. Less chance of being found. It had worked well enough until the third night. That's when everything changed. That's when I decided I was done with hiking for a long, long time. I woke up in the middle of the night with this unshakable feeling that something was wrong. No sound, no movement, just an oppressive sense of unease pressing down on me, the kind you don't ignore. I reached for my flashlight and unzipped the tent just enough to peer outside. The woods were silent. Too silent. I could see nothing beyond the dim halo of my light, just trees stretching endlessly into the dark. I checked my pack. That's when I noticed it. My wallet was gone. At first, I thought I had just misplaced it, maybe left it outside or shoved it into the wrong pocket. But after tearing through every inch of my gear, I knew the truth. Someone had taken it. The cash, my ID, my credit cards, everything was just gone. The thought made my skin crawl. Who the hell sneaks into someone's tent, takes only a wallet, and leaves? It didn't make sense. I tried to convince myself I just lost it, but deep down, I knew better. Over the next few days, things got worse. At first, it was small stuff. My lighter, a protein bar, my damn Swiss Army knife. I wasn't just losing things. Someone was stealing from me. The worst part, they weren't taking anything critical. They left my rifle, my tent, my boots. It was almost as if they were toying with me. By the fourth day, I accepted the truth. I wasn't alone out there. I was being stalked. There was no cell service in that part of the trail, no way to call for help. I considered turning back, but it would have only saved me a day or two, no real difference. Besides, no matter which direction I hiked, I'd still have to sleep at some point, and sleeping meant being vulnerable. That night, I tied my tent shut from the inside. It wouldn't stop someone determined, but at least I'd hear them coming. I forced myself to stay awake as long as I could, but exhaustion won. When morning came, nothing had been disturbed. My gear was still there, but the feeling of being watched never left. The solitude was starting to wear on me. The constant anxiety was unbearable. Every snapping twig sent my heart racing. Every shadow looked like something lurking just out of sight. And then came the hallucinations. It started small. Movement in the trees that vanished when I turned my head. The feeling of something just behind me, only to find nothing there. But the worst, the thing I can't explain, I was walking when I suddenly stepped into a puddle. The water splashed up, soaking my boot. I felt it, cold, wet, seeping into my sock. I even heard the sound. But when I looked down, the ground was bone dry. I stood there for a long time, staring at the dirt, my boot perfectly clean. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just some person following me. Something else was out there, and it was playing games with me. Nights were the worst. I'd tie my tent shut, but I knew it wouldn't stop whatever was out there if it really wanted in. And I still had days left to go. I slept with my rifle right next to me, but it did nothing to ease the gnawing fear in my chest. At one point, I had to splash ice-cold water on my face just to steady my breathing. It helped, at least a little. The hallucinations had mostly subsided by then, but I wasn't sure what I would have done if they had continued. Then came the next night. I woke up to the sound of footsteps. They weren't distant. They weren't some animal scurrying through the underbrush. They were close. Someone, was walking around my campsite. I reached for my rifle, gripping it tightly, ready to confront whoever was out there. But my body wouldn't move. I was frozen, paralyzed by some deep, primal fear. The footsteps circled my tent, slow, deliberate. I held my breath, listening, waiting. Then, just as suddenly as they came, they faded into the woods. I didn't sleep after that. As soon as the sun crept over the horizon, I packed up camp in a frenzy, my hands shaking so badly I could barely tie my gear. I was done. My truck was maybe a day and a half away, less if I pushed myself. And that's exactly what I planned to do. I wasn't spending another night out there. I hiked for hours, pushing my body harder than I ever had before. By the time the sun started to set, I made the decision. I was not stopping. No sleep. No camp. I would hike straight through the night if I had to. At first, it seemed manageable. My flashlight cut a narrow path through the darkness, my rifle a steady weight in my grip. But the deeper I went, the more I realized how unprepared I was for night hiking. Every shifting shadow felt like it was watching me. Every gust of wind carried something sinister in its wake. And then, after an hour of forcing myself forward, I heard it. Footsteps. Somewhere behind me, something was moving. I stopped dead in my tracks, my breath caught in my throat. Slowly, I turned, raising my flashlight. And that's when I saw it. A shadow, a figure, ducking behind a tree just out of reach of my light. Adrenaline surged through my veins. My hands clenched around my rifle as I aimed directly at the tree. My voice came out louder than I expected, raw and commanding. Come out. Now. For a second, nothing happened. Then, a man stepped forward. At least, I think it was a man. His body was gaunt, covered in dirt and scratches. His face was hidden beneath thick, matted hair, wild and unkempt. But the worst part? He was wearing my shorts, the ones I hadn't even realized were missing. He took a step toward me, then another. Even with a loaded rifle aimed straight at his chest, he kept coming. Something about him was wrong. It wasn't just the way he looked. It was the way he moved. The way his limbs twitched like he wasn't fully in control of them. The way his head tilted, eyes locked onto me studying. I didn't wait. I fired a warning shot into the dirt beside him. The gunshot echoed through the trees like a thunderclap. That did it. He bolted. He moved fast. Too fast. Disappearing into the woods in seconds. I stood there, heart hammering, rifle shaking in my hands. I knew I couldn't stay there a second longer. Without thinking, I turned and ran. I don't remember much of that last stretch of the hike. Just a blur of trees, sweat, and the overwhelming need to get out. When I reached my truck, I locked the doors, hands still trembling, and called the police. They arrived about an hour later, listened to my story, checked the area, and then they told me something that made my stomach drop. You shouldn't stick around here. That was all they said. No explanation, no theories, just a warning. I didn't need to be told twice. Looking back, the hallucinations were almost the worst part. I didn't think my mind was capable of seeing and feeling things that weren't real. But out there, in that vast, empty wilderness, reality bends in ways you can't imagine. I still think about that man. I still wonder if he was really human. And I can promise you this. The next time I go hiking, if I ever go hiking again, I won't be alone. Hey everyone! I put a lot of effort and heart into creating these videos just for you. If you're enjoying the content, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a quick comment below and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Your support means the world to me, and it keeps me motivated to bring more awesome videos your way. I've lived in the same house for about 15 years now, and ever since I was a child, strange things have happened here. My sister and I both have had our fair share of encounters, but I'll share some of the most unsettling experiences that happened to me. The first time I became aware of something unusual, I was about 9 or 10. I had a friend over for a sleepover, and we were hanging out in the basement. At some point, I went upstairs for something. I can't remember what, and as I was coming back down the stairs, I fell. It wasn't just a clumsy misstep. I distinctly felt hands on my back, a forceful push that sent me tumbling. It was only about 6 stairs, but I hit the bottom hard. As I lay there, stunned, I looked back up to see if someone, maybe my sister, had pushed me. That's when I saw it. There was a figure at the top of the stairs. It wasn't fully solid, nor did it have a defined shape. It was just there. The area around it looked blurred, like the background wasn't as sharp as it should have been. My friend came around the corner, asking if I was okay, and when I looked back up, the figure was gone. A few weeks later, something else happened. I was home alone, and I'd gone to the garage to grab a soda. As I stepped into the garage, I heard a strange noise coming from the attic above. At first, I couldn't quite place it, but then it became clear. They were footsteps, moving deliberately across the attic. Curious, I called out, "Hello!" The noise stopped, and for a second, everything was silent. Then suddenly, the footsteps burst into motion, trampling toward the attic door with alarming speed. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I bolted back into the house, out the front door, and refused to return until someone else was home. For years, I felt the presence in the house but didn't see it clearly. That changed last summer. It was late at night, and I was coming home after a party. While I fumbled with my keys at the door, I saw something huge and white standing just inside the house. Through the sidelight windows, I could see it clearly. He was massive. If he were real, he'd easily be 6'6" or 6'7", weighing 250 to 300 pounds. His entire body, including his face, was paper white, and he had a full head of jet black hair. I screamed. Without thinking, I shouted, "Leave me alone," and watched as he slid silently out of sight in the opposite direction. I rushed inside, locked my bedroom door, though I knew it wouldn't help, and tried to calm down. Since then, he's made his presence known in other ways. He likes to mess with people, especially me. He steals things, moves them, and seems to enjoy inhabiting electronics. One night, I had a group of friends over in the basement when we started hearing loud thuds from upstairs. I tried to tell myself it was just the cats, but then I remembered all the cats were outside. Nervously, I asked my friend Cody to come investigate with me. We checked the first floor and found nothing out of the ordinary, so we moved to the second floor. That's when we heard my mom's alarm clock going off in her room. It was around 9 p.m., far too early for anyone to have set an alarm. What made it even stranger was that the alarm was beeping, but my mom always uses the radio setting to wake up. I turned it off, feeling unsettled, and went back downstairs. Later that night, after everyone had left, I was tidying up on the first floor when I saw him again. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught movement in the hallway. He glided across the hallway and passed through the door into the garage. When I turned to look, I noticed a coat hanger on the hallway closet door swinging wildly, as though someone had just brushed past it. That was enough for me. I called my friends and had them come pick me up. I've had so many experiences like these over the years, and I still don't know what to make of him. Is he here to harm me, or is he just a mischievous presence who enjoys scaring me? Either way, I often ask him to leave me alone. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. About a month after my grandmother passed away, and just a few months before my grandfather followed her, our family was busy sorting through her belongings. Each of us received something to remember her by, and I ended up with her old bed. It became the guest bed in my room, complete with the thick, quilted cover she always kept on it. One night, my friend stayed over, and my sister joined us for a little sleepover party in my room. Since there were 3 of us, we each took a spot. I let my sister have my bed. My friend slept on my grandmother's old bed, and I made a cozy spot for myself on the floor with that thick quilt. I remember feeling a sense of comfort using something that had belonged to her. As I started to drift off, I was startled awake by a bright light shining directly in my face. My eyes snapped open, and for just a second, I saw her. A glowing face that disappeared almost as quickly as I registered it. It was unmistakable. It was my grandmother. I wasn't afraid. In fact, I felt an overwhelming sense of safety, like she was there to protect me, to make sure nothing bad could happen. It was a warmth I hadn't felt since she passed, and it brought me an unexpected peace. The next night, my friend stayed over again, and once more, my sister joined us. We all took the same spots as the night before. This time, though, I was hopeful, eager even, that I might see my grandmother again. Her presence had been such a comfort, and I longed to feel that closeness again. As I lay there, I forgot to take off my glasses. I started to fall asleep, a little disappointed that she hadn't appeared. Then, out of nowhere, I saw the light again. This time it was dimmer, though I wasn't sure if that was because I was tired or because of something else. My eyes were heavy, and it took me a moment to open them. Just as I was about to, I felt my glasses being gently pushed back onto my face. They had been slipping off. When I finally opened my eyes, I caught a glimpse of her glowing hand slowly pulling away from me. She was gone before I could fully take it in, but the feeling she left behind was unmistakable. I knew she was there, watching over me, making sure I was okay. For the next few months, I felt a profound sense of peace. Even though losing her had felt like a part of my heart had been ripped away, knowing she was still with me, keeping me safe, filled that void. It was as if she was letting me know that everything would be okay. A few months later, my grandfather passed away. While I was heartbroken to lose him, I found comfort in knowing that he was reunited with my grandmother. He had missed her terribly and often said he was ready to join her. In a way, his passing felt like the final chapter of their love story. Since then, I haven't seen either of them, but I believe they're together now, at peace and watching over me. The memory of those nights stays with me, a reminder that love doesn't end, even after someone is gone. Today, I'm sharing a tale that was passed down to me by my dad, which makes it even more intriguing because I know it's true. This happened before I was born, back when my parents were newlyweds. It's a story about an unsettling house, whispers in the night, and things that can't quite be explained. After my parents got married, they lived with my grandparents for a while before eventually moving to the U.S. At the same time, my uncle and his new wife moved into a house directly across from my grandparents. The area where these houses were built used to be an old rice field, land that had witnessed the events of World War II. That history seemed to linger in the air, as if the past had left its mark. The story begins when my uncle hired a maid to help look after the house, since they weren't there all the time. Everything seemed fine at first, but just a few days in, something strange happened. One morning, the maid came to my uncle and asked if my aunt had called her during the night. Confused, my uncle said no and asked why. The maid explained that she had heard a little lady's voice calling her name. My uncle brushed it off, thinking she must have been dreaming, and told her as much. The maid, too, thought perhaps it was just her imagination. But then it happened again. And again, each time, the maid insisted that she had clearly heard the voice, but my uncle and my dad dismissed it, thinking she might be making up stories or overreacting. Then came the day that changed everything. It was a Saturday afternoon. My dad, my mom, my uncle, and my aunt were coming back from a tennis match when they noticed police officers talking to my grandparents outside their house. Alarmed, they rushed over to find out what was going on. The police explained that the maid had been found hiding behind my grandparents' refrigerator, terrified and shouting, "They're going to get me! They're going to get me!" Confused, they asked her who she was talking about. The maid, shaking with fear, said, "The little people living in my uncle's house." The incident left everyone unnerved, but the maid was eventually taken to the hospital. After she was discharged, she returned to her hometown. The doctor said she had pre-existing psychological issues, which seemed like a reasonable explanation at the time. My uncle and my parents chose to believe that it was nothing more than a case of overactive imagination. But the story didn't end there. Years later, when I was about 7, my uncle had already moved out of that house. It was rented out to a couple with one child. One evening, the couple came to my dad in a bit of a panic. They explained that they had accidentally locked themselves out and needed the spare key. My dad, always willing to help, grabbed the key and went with them to the house. When they reached the front door, my dad checked that it was indeed locked. He was just about to insert the key into the lock when the door slowly creaked open on its own. He stood there for a moment, stunned, and turned to the couple. "Are you sure you locked this?" he asked. The couple insisted that they had double-checked before coming to him for help. That moment shook my dad. After years of brushing off strange stories about that house, he finally admitted that there might be something unusual about it, something not entirely normal. The house still stands today, but its mysteries remain unsolved. Who or what was calling the maid's name? The first time it happened, I was just 12 years old. My younger sister and I shared a large bed in our room, and one night I woke up to find the entire room glowing with a strange green light. It was surreal. Our house had a beautiful view of the city lights, and on any normal night, they would shine brightly through the window. But this was different, an eerie, otherworldly glow that seemed to emanate from nowhere. As I looked around, I realized something was terribly wrong. I couldn't move. No matter how hard I tried, my body wouldn't respond. I panicked, struggling with all my strength to lift even a finger, but nothing worked. Desperately, I looked over at my sister, who was sleeping peacefully beside me, completely unaware of my struggle. I tried to scream for my mom, but all I could manage was a faint whimper. Even my sister didn't stir. In my desperation, I somehow willed my arms to move. I could feel my fingertips brushing against my shoulders, but when I glanced down, my arms were still pinned at my sides. It was as if my body had betrayed me. Terrified and helpless, I could only wait for it to end. Minutes passed, 5, maybe 10, before the sensation began to fade, and I drifted back to sleep. The next morning, I woke up completely fine, but the memory of that night stayed with me. Even now, 19 years later, it's as vivid as ever. The next incident happened a few years later, when I was about 15. By then, we had moved to a different house, and I had my own bedroom. One morning, I woke up late to find the sunlight streaming through my window. I was lying on my back, and once again, I couldn't move. This time, I felt a warm, heavy sensation pressing against my back, almost like I was lying on one of those heated back massagers. What made this experience even stranger was the sound. All around me, I could hear mechanical voices, indistinct and overlapping, as if a group of beings were having a conversation. They weren't human voices, and I couldn't make out what they were saying, but the sound was unmistakable. Strangely enough, I wasn't terrified. I was more curious than anything. After about 5 minutes, the paralysis faded, and I fell back asleep, waking up later without any lingering effects. Around that same time, I experienced a few more similar episodes. In one of them, I was lying on my side when the warm, heavy sensation returned. This time, I also felt the presence of someone, or something with me. I never saw anyone, but I could sense it. Even then, I wasn't particularly scared, though the feeling was undeniably strange. Years passed without any major incidents, and I began to think I'd left these experiences behind. But a few years ago, they started happening again. One day, I was napping on my couch when I woke up, completely unable to move. This time, I was much more frightened. As a single mom, my first thought was for my young son, who was in the house. I prayed that nothing was seriously wrong with me and that the paralysis would pass quickly. Thankfully, it did. There were no strange lights, no warm sensations, and no voices, just the sheer terror of being trapped in my own body. A few days later, it happened again. Same couch, same position. This time, though, I was prepared. I stayed as calm as I could, silently willing my body to snap out of it. Eventually, it did. Even after all these years, I still can't fully explain what causes these episodes. Are they just tricks of the mind, or could there be something more to them? Whatever the case, they've left me with a deep curiosity and a little wariness about the mysteries of sleep and consciousness. I'm pretty sure I've had one or two more encounters in my bedroom over the years, but honestly, they were so uneventful that I barely remember them. No levitating, no voices, no demons, and no shadowy figures yelling at me. Just the same old strange sensation of being unable to move. Nothing particularly noteworthy. But my most recent episode, just 2 months ago, was a little different. It was late afternoon, and I was lying down in my bedroom for a nap. I'm not usually one to nap, so I must have been feeling a little under the weather that day. I was face down, with my head resting on my right arm near the opening in the middle of my headboard, where I store books and magazines. Suddenly, I woke up with a jolt and realized I couldn't move. The familiar sensation of paralysis crept over me. I sensed someone, or something, in the room with me, but this time I wasn't scared. In fact, I found the whole thing oddly amusing. Here's why. As I struggled to regain control of my body, I noticed my TV remote lying near my right hand. For some reason, grabbing that remote became my singular focus. It seemed like a brilliant idea at the time. Don't ask me why. I fought to move my hand, inching toward the remote, and eventually managed to grab it. Victory. I placed the remote in the headboard's opening, feeling a small sense of triumph. I was exhausted from the effort, though, and soon drifted back to sleep. Later that evening, I returned to my bedroom. I reached for the remote where I had placed it during my paralysis episode, but to my surprise, it wasn't there. Instead, it was exactly where I had left it before my nap, on the other side of the bed, resting on the top of the headboard. That's when it hit me. The entire incident had been a dream. I'd felt the remote in my hand. I'd seen myself moving it, yet the reality was completely different. It felt so real, but I knew in my mind that it wasn't. Now that you've read about my experiences, I'll let you in on a little secret. A few years ago, I came across a fascinating medical show about sleep paralysis. As I watched, I was shocked to realize that everything they described matched my own experiences perfectly. The show featured people who had suffered far worse episodes than I ever had. Demons, aliens, levitations, all kinds of terrifying things. Compared to theirs, my experiences seemed tame. Still, I truly believe that all of these events, no matter how dramatic, stem from the same phenomenon, sleep paralysis. Here's the interesting part. I've come to believe that what we experience during sleep paralysis is influenced by our own minds, our cultural beliefs, our personal fears, and our imaginations. A good friend of mine once confided in me about his own episodes. He described a black shadow sitting on his chest, suffocating him as he slept. In his Hmong culture, this is seen as an evil spirit that punishes those who have been too cocky. When I explained that it was likely sleep paralysis, he breathed a sigh of relief and hasn't experienced it since. For me, knowing that these episodes are just a natural phenomenon has made all the difference. Over the years, my fear has diminished to almost nothing. The mind is an incredibly powerful instrument, capable of creating vivid, terrifying scenarios without the help of scary movies or Stephen King novels. Just our dreams alone can be enough to scare the daylights out of us. When I lived in Mexico, my days were filled with encounters I still struggle to fully explain. Supernatural experiences seemed woven into the fabric of life there. At the time, I wasn't as afraid as I might be now. In some strange way, those moments were both the worst and the best parts of my life, terrifying yet unforgettable. One night, when I was 16 years old, something happened that has stayed with me ever since. I had just drifted into the edge of sleep when I heard a woman's voice softly calling my name. My body froze. I realized I couldn't move, not even to open my eyes. It was as though I'd slipped into sleep paralysis, but this time, it wasn't just a fleeting sensation. I strained to figure out if the voice was my mom's, but something felt off. Suddenly, I felt a force grab my ankles. It pulled me sharply, shifting me onto my side. And then, to my horror, I felt someone lie down beside me. Panic surged through me, but I couldn't move. I tried to speak, to ask if it was my mom, but my lips wouldn't form the words. All I could do was babble incoherently until I managed to force out a broken question. "Are you my mom?" I prayed. I prayed as hard as I could, repeating the words in my mind like a shield against whatever was happening. Slowly, I regained control, and my eyes fluttered open. The presence was gone, but as relief washed over me, I heard laughter outside, my mom's unmistakable laugh, coming from the neighbor's house. That's when it hit me. It couldn't have been her. The presence lingered in our home after that night. The ghostly woman became less interested in me and more focused on my mother. It started as small disturbances, things moving on their own strange noises, but it quickly escalated. My mom would complain about being thrown off the bed or tripped while walking, and though she cursed at the spirit in frustration, it only seemed to make things worse. My mom often told my dad about the incidents, but he refused to believe her. To him, it was all just imagination or exaggeration. That is, until one night when the spirit decided to make her presence undeniably known. It was November 20th, a day when our town held its annual festival. My dad told my mom and me to go ahead to the festivities, saying he'd pick us up when it was over. In the middle of the dancing, I noticed my dad nearby. When the dance ended, I walked up to him and asked if it was time to leave. He shook his head and said, "No, we'll stay until it's over." He seemed a little uneasy, but I didn't press him about it. Later, when we returned home, he finally told us what had happened while we were gone. He had decided to lie down for a short rest, but as soon as he got into bed, he felt something shifting beneath him, as though the mattress were moving on its own. At first, he thought it might be an animal. He looked under the bed, but there was nothing there. And then, the bed shook again, stronger this time. That was enough for him. He fled the house, not stopping until he reached the safety of the festival. My mom and I listened in shock as he shared his story. For years, he had dismissed my mom's experiences, waving them off as silly superstitions. But that night, he couldn't deny the truth. At last, he believed us. Now I'm a mother of two, and though years have passed, I still think about what happened in that house. Those moments were terrifying, but they're part of a past I've learned to accept. I'm relieved it's all behind me now, and I can only hope that my children never have to encounter anything like it. This is less of a story and more of a plea for help. If there's anyone out there who can offer guidance, I would be forever grateful. 5 years ago, out of sheer necessity, I moved into an old house. I was desperate to shorten the 15-mile drive to my son's high school, which I made 5 days a week. I promised myself it would only be temporary, but even after my son graduated 2 years ago, financial constraints have kept me stuck here. I've always been sensitive to spirits. It's something I've felt since childhood. Over time, this sensitivity has only grown stronger, and this house seems to amplify it. From the moment I moved in, I've felt a presence. It isn't just a vague feeling. I hear it. At night, heavy footsteps echo through the kitchen and living room, but they never go beyond that. They simply vanish. The sound is distinct. Heavy boots with a long stride. It's not exactly terrifying, but there's an undeniable eeriness to it. Sometimes I hear noises as though something has fallen, yet when I check, nothing is out of place. And then there's the constant sensation of being watched, an invisible gaze quietly observing every move I make. The other day, while I was washing dishes at the sink, I felt a sudden poke at my side. It wasn't aggressive, but more like a child trying to get my attention. Shadows dart by me, quick and fleeting, and when I turn to look directly at them, they're gone. Despite all of this, I've managed to live with it. It's creepy, yes, but it doesn't feel threatening. Not everyone in the house has been as comfortable as I tried to be. My niece stayed with me for a short time, and it terrified her. She told me the doorknob in her bedroom would wiggle, as if someone were trying to get in. It didn't turn, just jiggled. Night after night, she was too scared to sleep, and I had to help her cope with her fear. My son experienced his own encounters here before he left for the army, but to this day, he refuses to tell me what happened. He says he doesn't want to frighten me, and honestly, he's probably right. While what happens inside that house is unsettling, it's what's outside that truly terrifies me. Please understand, I don't say this lightly, and I'm not writing this from the confines of a mental institution. I know how it might sound, but the presence outside my house, it's new, only about 3 weeks old, is something entirely different. The only way I can describe it is pure evil. The fear it instills is unlike anything I've ever felt before. I leave for work very early, around 3:30 a.m., when it's still pitch dark outside. Some mornings, the presence isn't there, and I feel a cautious sense of relief. But on the mornings it is, I feel it watching me from the fence line of my rural property. It's an oppressive, suffocating awareness, as though it's waiting for me to step into its territory. The first sign it gave me was a distinct whistle. At first, I wasn't sure what to make of it, but the next encounter nearly caused my heart to stop. That morning, I woke as usual and let my hound dog out to use the bathroom. My dog, usually eager to explore, froze on the porch. His neck bristled, and he barked and growled into the darkness. I opened the door wider, and he bolted back inside, trembling, hiding under my bed. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe it was just a raccoon or a possum spooking him. After about 20 minutes, my dog went back to the door, seemingly ready to go outside again. But when I opened the door, he refused to step beyond the porch. He stood there, growling into the shadows, his fur still raised in alarm. I gave him a gentle push, but he wouldn't budge. Defeated, he ran back inside and hid under the bed once more. At this point, I wasn't scared, just deeply confused by his behavior. But the time had come for me to leave for work. I turned off all the lights, locked my front door, and walked cautiously down the sidewalk to my car. The air was unnervingly still, amplifying every sound. Passing through the front gate, I felt as though unseen eyes were tracking my every step. My hands trembled slightly as I slid into the driver's seat and shut the door behind me. The window was halfway down, letting the night air seep into the car. I inserted my keys into the ignition and reached for the headlight switch, but for some reason, I couldn't find it. My mind felt foggy, distracted, from the direction of the darkness that had terrified my dog just hours earlier. About 50 feet in front of my car, I heard a noise that froze me in place. It was unlike anything I'd ever heard before, a deep, baritone sound that echoed unnaturally, like someone blowing on a distorted duck call. But it wasn't just distant. It was so sharp and loud that it felt like it was right in my ear. The sound was piercing, painful, and my ears throbbed from its intensity. My chest tightened, my heart pounded as if it were lodged in my throat, and a splitting headache surged through my temples. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Every instinct screamed at me to get away. I turned the key, and the car roared to life. My hands shook so violently that I could barely grip the steering wheel. Pressing the gas pedal was a struggle. My foot felt heavy, uncoordinated. I reversed out of the driveway and finally managed to locate the headlight switch. As the beams flickered on, I directed them toward the area where the sound had come from. My eyes strained, scanning every inch of the illuminated space, but there was nothing. Only the same quiet emptiness, as if the noise had never existed. A week later, something else happened that I can't explain. I received a phone call from my best friend, or at least, that's what the caller ID displayed. When I answered, I said, "Hello," but instead of her familiar voice, I heard a faint male voice respond. The sound was distant, almost like he was speaking from the other end of a long tunnel. There was a static-like crackling that made it difficult to understand, but his voice carried a subtle accent. Hispanic, maybe. "Hello," he said, the word drawn out and strange. My throat tightened as unease crept in. I hesitated, then asked, "Who is this?" There was a long, uncomfortable pause before he finally replied, "Who is this?" His voice was slow, deliberate, and the question sent chills down my spine. My fingers hovered over the end call button, but something stopped me. Swallowing my fear, I asked him if he had the wrong number. "No," he answered. That was it. The line went dead. I immediately called my friend back, desperate to understand what had just happened. She answered quickly, sounding confused. "Did you just call me?" I asked. "Yes," she said, but the phone was acting strange. It was making this weird noise, like static, loud and blaring, and then the sound kept fading in and out. She seemed unnerved and wanted to know if my phone was having issues too. I didn't know how to respond. I didn't even know if this strange call was connected to the other events, but it felt wrong, like a piece of a puzzle I didn't have the answers to. It left me shaken, the unsettling feeling lingering long after the conversation ended. I don't know what's happening in my house or why these things are targeting me, but the fear is overwhelming. Every night, as the sun sets, I find myself bracing for the next strange encounter. I sit on my couch, clutching a sense of dread, feeling like the presence outside is biding its time, waiting for an opportunity to break in. It's not just fear I feel. It's something darker, more insidious. It's as though whatever is out there is feeding on my terror, growing stronger from it. I've done everything I can think of to protect myself. I even went so far as to pray and sprinkle olive oil around the house, inside and out, hoping it would create some sort of barrier. But the presence remains. It won't leave me alone. There's a growing part of me that wonders if this is some kind of warning. My son is due to leave for Iraq in September, and I can't shake the fear that this is connected to him, that something is trying to prepare me for impending tragedy. I don't know if that's true, but the thought haunts me. Since I was 3 years old, I've experienced things that are difficult to explain, voices in my mind, dreams of personal future events, and even a near-death experience. These moments shaped my life in ways I can hardly put into words. They've saved me countless times and guided me through subtle hints and signs, leading me to find and marry my true love, my soulmate Rob. But as remarkable as that sounds, our journey to finding each other was far from simple. Rob and I didn't meet until we were both in our 40s, each with 2 failed marriages behind us. Our meeting felt destined. In 1994, I placed an ad in the personal section of a Las Vegas newspaper. Among the many responses, Rob's stood out. There was something about him that drew me in, an undeniable feeling that he was the one I had been searching for all along. During one of our first few dates, it became clear to me that every paranormal message I had received throughout my life had led me to this very moment, to Rob. The realization was so overwhelming that I struggled to explain it to him in words. After just 2 months of dating, I moved into Rob's house, and a year later, we were married. For the first time, I felt complete. But our happiness as newlyweds was short-lived. Rob passed away suddenly, and my world shattered. Yet, in many ways, I've never been without him. Since his passing, Rob has found ways to reach me, to remind me that his presence endures beyond the physical world. He's appeared to me in countless forms, a mist by my side, his familiar voice speaking softly, and even as a bright star in the night sky. Sometimes it's the small, uncanny signs, our wedding song playing on the radio exactly when I'm feeling most lost or distressed. Each time, I know it's him, comforting me in his own way. One moment stands out vividly. It was Easter Sunday in 1998, 7 months after Rob passed. I returned to his house in the desert, a place I had abandoned after his death, to check on things. As I inserted the key into the lock, I was stopped by a strong, sweet floral scent. Looking down, I noticed lily of the valley flowers blooming in one of the flower beds Rob had built. I had planted several kinds of flower seeds there in the summer of 1997, but none had grown until that day. These delicate flowers, untouched by water for over 7 months, were thriving. It was as though Rob had nurtured them himself. There are other signs, too, just as extraordinary. Rob's wristwatch, the one he wore to work every day, continues to sound its alarm at the same time each day. It's been over 9 years since his passing, and the watch still runs on the same battery he installed. And then there's the most unforgettable moment of all. An imprint of Rob's soul left on my bedroom window screen. He came to me early one morning, touching my body the same way I had touched his after he passed, as if to say, "I'm still here." Rob's love is constant, eternal. Like the words of the wedding song we left to fate to choose for us, our bond is unbreakable. It transcends time, space, and even death. The love we share will truly last forever. This happened just a few weeks ago on a Thursday night. I had to wake up early for school the next day, so I tried really hard to get some sleep. Hours passed, and no matter how much I tossed and turned, I just couldn't fall asleep. It was 4:00 a.m. when I heard it, loud tapping, coming from somewhere in the house. I wasn't sure where exactly, but I knew it wasn't coming from the door to my bedroom. I have 2 cats, so my first thought was that one of them was playing around. But then I paused. How could a cat make a noise like that? It sounded too deliberate, too rhythmic. I quietly slid out of bed and tiptoed into the hallway, which stretched all the way down to my dad's room. The tapping had stopped by the time I reached the hallway. At least 10 seconds passed, and then I heard it, a soft sighing sound, coming from the bathroom. I stood frozen outside my bedroom, fear creeping up my spine. At the time, I didn't really believe in ghosts, so I told myself it was probably just my brother playing a prank. I walked cautiously toward the bathroom, ready for him to jump out and scare me. But when I stepped inside, what I saw was something I couldn't explain. In the corner of the shower stood a dark shadow. I blinked, thinking it was just my eyes playing tricks on me, but when I turned on the light, the figure was still there, facing the corner. My heart raced and panic surged through me. I couldn't make sense of what I was seeing. I turned and ran back to my room, throwing myself under the covers, hoping it was all just a nightmare. Then came the sound of light footsteps, soft but unmistakable, moving out of the bathroom. I held my breath, hiding under the blankets, praying whatever it was would leave. But when I peeked from beneath the covers, my blood ran cold. There, standing in my doorway, was a woman. She was tall, blonde, and looked to be in her 30s, dressed in a white nightgown. But the nightgown was stained, covered in blood. In her hand, she held a knife. My throat went dry, and I screamed as loud as I could, throwing myself back under the covers, trembling with fear. The footsteps grew louder, pounding down the hallway. I heard my dad's voice calling out, rushing toward me. When my dad burst into my room, I knew he wouldn't believe what I had seen. I told him it was just a bad dream, trying to convince both of us that it wasn't real. He gave me a stern look, but patted me on the back, as if reassuring me that everything was fine. Since that night, I haven't seen the woman or the dark figure again, but I know deep down that something is still haunting my house. I don't know what it was, but I can't shake the feeling that it's still out there waiting. I had my first cat, Tabs, since the day I was born. She was an independent cat, but every now and then, she'd curl up next to me on my bed. The thing she loved most was sleeping under the covers by my legs, something that was a little annoying, but endearing in its own way. Sadly, Tabs passed away 8 years ago. She had been through an operation on her throat, and the stress was just too much for her. Afterward, she crawled under the stairs, fell asleep, and never woke up. I was devastated. Tabs was my first pet, and losing her was my first experience with the pain of death. A couple of days after she passed, I was in bed, trying to sleep, when I felt something familiar, something cat-sized, move up the side of my leg. The duvet shifted, as if something small had crawled under it. At first, I thought maybe I had moved my leg, causing the air to shift, but when I tried to recreate the same effect, it didn't work. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't anything I could explain. I believe Tabs came back to say her final goodbye, and that moment gave me a sense of peace that I desperately needed. After Tabs passed, we adopted 2 new kittens, Socks and Whitewash. Unfortunately, 2 years ago, Socks was hit by a car right outside our house. It was another devastating blow. Just like before, a few days after her death, I was lying in bed reading when I kept seeing a wisp of black moving near the side of my bed. It wasn't a shadow or a trick of the light. There was something there. The movement was familiar, just like how Socks used to walk around the bed, sometimes slipping under it, with only her tail or back visible. Socks was black, and I could swear I saw her in the corner of my eye, walking around as she once did. It felt like she had come back, just for a moment, to say goodbye. I never saw her again after that, and I haven't felt her presence since. Both of my cats, Tabs and Socks, came to visit me one last time, and after those moments, I knew they had moved on. When my friends moved into their first apartment, they didn't have much furniture, but there was one piece that stood out, a big old couch. At first glance, it seemed like an ordinary, maybe a bit worn, piece of furniture, but there was something strange about it. It wasn't just any couch. It was haunted. I know that sounds ridiculous, but trust me, it was a haunted couch. The weirdness started as soon as you sat on it. If you let your legs dangle over the side, you'd feel this strange pressure, like something was tapping at you from underneath. Of course, when you looked, there was nothing there. At first, it was just odd, but then the phenomenon got even more unsettling. If you set a drink, like a beer or a soda, on the arm of the couch, it would always fall over, no matter how carefully you placed it. There were also these bizarre scratching noises that seemed to come from directly underneath the couch. And sometimes you'd hear a blood-curdling yell, the kind that would make your skin crawl and your heart race. Things really started to get creepy, and it didn't help that my friend Jenny had to sleep next to the couch on the floor. One night she woke up to soft breathing right near her head. When she looked over, she saw eyes staring out from beneath the couch. The eyes were staring right at her, unblinking and cold. That was the moment she finally convinced her boyfriend to get rid of it. Jenny called me and another friend to come over and help move the couch. As we were lifting it, someone must have tripped, because the couch shifted and something thumped onto the floor. We put the couch down to investigate, and that's when we saw it. Lying there, almost perfectly preserved, was the body of an old cat. It had brown and white fur, and its tail had been cropped. It looked so intact, so lifelike, that we could even see the details in the fur. It was as if the cat had been frozen in time. Shocked, we quickly buried the cat in the yard, hoping that would be the end of it. And that was it. The strange happenings stopped. The couch was gone, and Jenny and her boyfriend could finally breathe easy again. It might not sound like the most terrifying thing to everyone, but for those 5 months, that couch was a source of constant dread. It was an ordeal for them, and I'll never forget the unease it left behind. My name is Luke, and I am a Christian. I mention this first because I believe that the event I'm about to share with you is directly tied to my faith. If you don't share my beliefs, that's perfectly okay, but I feel it's important to provide some context. And so the story begins. When I was 20 years old, I accepted Jesus Christ as my Savior. The denomination I belong to is the Independent Baptist Movement, and as a Baptist, I believe in angels and devils, though most people refer to them as demons. I use the word devils because that's the term used in the King James Bible. I believe in guardian angels, and I also believe that devils are drawn to symbols of the occult. Shortly after I was saved, the Christian term for receiving Jesus as Savior, I began to research the occult. My intention wasn't to delve into these practices, but to understand them, so I could help others who might be caught up in it. I believe the occult is a dangerous and deceptive practice. The events I'm about to describe are, to the best of my memory, factual, and I've shared them with many others since they happened. In 2001, not long after my salvation, I began reading various non-canon books in search of information about the pagan beliefs associated with Roman Catholicism. I looked into writings like the Shepherd of Hermas, the Book of Enoch, and the Maccabees. However, I didn't find much of what I was searching for, which I eventually discovered later in the Council of Trent. But that's a different story. What I did find, however, were many references to devils, angels, and the judgment of the former. This led me to research figures like Aleister Crowley. Many of you may know Crowley as one of the most influential figures in the New Age movement, alongside others like Westcott, Hort, and Blavatsky. Looking back, I deeply regret researching these individuals, especially Blavatsky and Crowley. Even now, it feels like simply mentioning their names invites a presence of something otherworldly. As I type these words, I can't shake the fear that once gripped me so strongly during my research. While I researched, I would pray for protection, and thankfully, God provided. However, I also recognize that there are times in the Bible where God allows devils to torment his people. The Apostle Paul, for example, was tormented by a messenger of Satan, allowed by God in order to keep Paul humble and reliant on him. As Christians, we cannot be possessed or killed by devils, but we can certainly be harassed and tormented. The nights in Australia are generally warm, and even in winter, I can usually get by with just a sheet or a thin blanket. On this particular night, I had just settled into bed after reading more about the occult. That's when I noticed the cold. It was sudden and sharp, like an icy chill creeping into my room. The unease that settled over me was palpable, so much so that I couldn't bring myself to leave the safety of my bed to fetch more blankets, even though I could have easily walked to the linen cupboard. Fear held me there in the bed, unable to move. I sleep with my door open, but I keep the lights off. I'm not afraid of the dark. The open door allows air to circulate, which prevents me from waking with a dry throat and nose. That night, like most nights, I drifted off into a light sleep, but then I realized I hadn't spoken with God in some time. As I attempted to pull the thin sheet tighter around me, the unease intensified. It was as if something was wrong, but I couldn't place it. I woke up to the soft, familiar sound of the light in the living room being turned on. I heard the unmistakable clink of a mug being set down on the breakfast bar. I had heard this noise often at night, and usually I attributed it to my mother, finishing her hot chocolate before bedtime. But when I glanced at my watch, I was startled to see that it was 1:15 in the morning. Too late for my mother to be awake. I remembered that I had turned off the lights when I went to bed, as I can't sleep if they're on. I heard the sound of the mug being put down again. This time, the lights in the living room went off. A chill ran down my neck, and I immediately felt the sharp coldness in the room again. This was when things began to get really unsettling. Terrifying, in fact. I lay in the stillness of my room, paralyzed by an icy feeling that wrapped itself around me. The air, which should have been warm and familiar, felt suffocating. The coldness in the room wasn't just physical. It felt like something far darker was in the atmosphere, pressing in on me. I tried to convince myself that it was just my imagination, but the unease wouldn't go away. Then I heard it. A soft whispering sound, almost imperceptible, came from the hallway outside my door. It was low and drawn out, like someone was standing just beyond the threshold, murmuring quietly. I froze, my heart racing. The whispering grew louder, but the words were unintelligible, just a faint murmur, almost like a chant. It wasn't until I heard the distinct sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate steps, that the weight of the situation truly hit me. My pulse quickened, my throat dry, as if the very air in my room had thickened. I couldn't move. I couldn't even breathe. The presence in my room, the one I had felt earlier, seemed to be growing stronger. My thoughts raced back to what I had been reading just before all this started. The occult, Aleister Crowley, spirits, angels, devils. I knew I had opened a door, but I had no idea how wide it was now open. The steps in the hallway came closer, and I could feel the temperature drop even further. It was now so cold I could see my breath fogging in front of me. My fingers clutched the edge of the blanket, knuckles white, as if I could somehow hold on to some semblance of reality through sheer force. I had no intention of opening the door to check. No part of me wanted to see what was waiting for me in the hallway. But then I heard the knock. Soft, deliberate, 3 knocks on my door, one after another. A pause. Then 2 more knocks, even softer, almost like someone was trying to get my attention without being noticed. I sat motionless, my eyes locked on the door, my heartbeat thundering in my chest. My mind screamed at me to get up, to run, to do anything, but my body wouldn't obey. I was frozen in place, trapped by a force I couldn't understand. I wanted to call out to God, to pray, but the words wouldn't come. My voice felt caught in my throat, as if it too was being stifled by whatever was present in the room. The darkness outside my door felt alive, shifting and moving, like something was waiting for me to make the first move. And then, as if answering some silent question, the door creaked open, just slightly, enough to let in a sliver of light from the living room. I could feel the presence of whatever it was out there, standing just beyond the door. My breath caught in my throat. I wanted to look to see what was there, but I couldn't. It was as though I knew, deep down, that seeing it would only make it worse. In that moment, I realized I wasn't just afraid of whatever was outside my door. I was afraid of what I had invited into my life through my curiosity, my research, and my lack of understanding. I had been searching for knowledge, but in doing so, I had opened myself up to something far more dangerous than I could have imagined. Then, the whispering stopped. The footsteps faded away, and the room seemed to return to its normal temperature. It was as if the presence had never been there at all, but I knew better. I could feel it lingering just outside my door, still watching, still waiting. I finally found my voice, and I whispered a prayer under my breath, asking God to protect me, to close the door I had foolishly opened. The weight in the room began to lift, but I knew this wasn't over. Whatever I had encountered, it wasn't something I could simply walk away from. The fear was still there, gnawing at the edges of my mind, and I realized that my curiosity had brought me closer to the unknown than I had ever wanted to be. Hey everyone! I put a lot of effort and heart into creating these videos just for you. If you're enjoying the content, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a quick comment below and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Your support means the world to me, and it keeps me motivated to bring more awesome videos your way.